What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto loses his right arm during his battle with Kakuzu? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The moon shone overhead, its light penetrating through the canopy of the trees. A small group moved quickly through the forest despite the axes strapped to their backs. The tallest by at least a head, grumbled as she adjusted her helmet atop her head. "Why must we meet in the forest?" she complained, pushing her pink hair from her face. "Our halls are spacious enough for the elves, not to mention that we wouldn't be nearly as vulnerable there as we are out here." "Because, my dear Sakura," the leader of the group said, turning to face her, "the elves can be a bit, well, proud enough to become nothing more than a pack of Dao," Sakura suggested, a smirk on her face. The other two companions chuckled, their chainmail clinking together the only sound in the quiet of the forest. He sighed, turning back to face the pathway, making his way towards a clearing in the distance. "I hope that you will be more amiable to them, daughter," he said as they neared the clearing. "Ah, leave her alone. She's just having a bit of fun, Kazashi," one of the companions called out, causing Sakura's smirk to widen. Kazashi merely shook his head as they entered the ring of light around the clearing created by the fire in the center. Sakura glanced over Kazashi's hair to look into the clearing. Standing by the fire could be seen three men, each looking similar to the other, their pointed ears sticking out from the black hair framing their faces. The dwarf group reached the clearing, right arms crossing their chests as they bowed to the elves. "Greetings, Dokkel of the West," Kazashi said, getting up from his bow. "To whom do I address as leader?" "That would be I," the eldest of the three said, stepping forward. His black hair was short, and there were some lines of his face as Sakura noted. Clearly, he was far older than he appeared. "I am Fugaku Uchiha, and these are my sons, Itachi and Sasuke," he said, gesturing towards the two standing beside him. "Greetings, Lord Kazashi," Itachi said, bowing towards Kazashi. Sasuke mimicked the action, though no pleasantries were exchanged. Kazashi smiled at the boys before turning back to Fugaku, face serious. "Do you know why the wizard has called us here?" he asked. Fugaku shook his head, the fire casting shadows across his face. "I do not. He merely told us to meet at this time, and that the news he had to tell us was of the gravest importance." Sakura snorted, arms crossed across her chest. "Well then, if it's so important, why isn't he here now?" "Sakura," Kazashi hissed, glancing back at her. Fugaku merely raised his hand, a small quirk to his lips being hidden by the shadows. "Rest Kazashi, for she is young. She is not familiar with Kakashi's lackadaisical ways. Or patience for that matter," Sasuke muttered, casting a disdainful glance her way. Sakura growled, glaring at him from across the fire. "I'm glad you wish to speak now, Dekkel," she bit out. "For a moment I thought you were mute, though I see now that you're merely rude." "I speak only when I deem it fit," Sasuke said, facing her, "something that you apparently must learn." Sakura growled louder, clenching her fists as she felt Kazashi's eyes on her. The tension between them dissipated though when the bushes rustled. All eyes moved towards the area, some hands even reaching for weapons. Slowly, a blue-cloaked figure appeared, grass growing from his matching hat. Small trinkets jingled as he walked, his staff casting a guiding light for him. He looked up, scanning the clearing, a lone eye crinkled as he smiled at everyone. "Well, looks like I'm right on time," he said, the light from the staff extinguishing. "Yes, Kakashi, if you call arriving 2 hours after we have to be on time." Fugaku said, a small smile on his face. Kakashi faced him, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yes, well, I got a bit lost on the path of life," Kakashi said. "Really interesting path this time around. I think I may have found the answer to." "Why are we here?" Sasuke interrupted, glaring slightly at the wizard. Sakura smirked as she saw Fugaku cast a disapproving glance at Sasuke. Clearly patience did not come easily to him either. Kakashi turned to look at the young elf, eyebrow raised. "Ah yes, I did forget to mention that to you all, didn't I?" "Very well then," he said, glancing around at the group. "As some of you may have noticed, there have been small disturbances across the land. Nothing major, but there has definitely been a pattern. I took it upon myself to investigate it, and found, well, it's quite hard to say it without causing a bit of panic." "Speak, my dear friend," Kazashi implored. "Whatever it is, we can handle it." "Well then, I'll put it bluntly," he said, The giant enchantress Kaguya is gathering an army to take back the lost city of Konoha. At his words the group erupted into fervent mutterings, Kakashi catching snippets of each conversation. She's still alive? How do we fight a monster like her? Kakashi sighed, banging his staff on the ground thrice to gain their attention. The groups quieted down, looking back towards the wizard. Now that I have your attention again, he began, I will tell you that not all hope is lost. The great war from centuries ago was won, and it can be won again. But it will require cooperation on everyone's parts. Kakashi, that war killed thousands of each race. One of the companions in the dwarf group cried out, you've only called our two clans together. That's not nearly enough manpower. Not to mention that we don't have the heir to fight with us. Kakashi's eye crinkled as he smiled. Ah, but you're wrong, we do have the heir. I plan to speak with him tomorrow, and then a quest will be underway to gather forces from everywhere to fight against her. And what of the dragons? Kazashi asked, glancing nervously at the fire. You know as well as we all do that Kaguya used the powers of the Nine in that battle. That is also going to part of the journey, Kakashi stated. It will be the goal of the heir, myself, and two people from your clans to either befriend the beasts for this war, or kill them. The two groups eyed each warily, waiting for the first to speak up. After a long period of silence, Sakura stepped forward, arm crossing her chest as she bowed before Kakashi. I, Sakura Haruno, swear by my forge, that I will join you, Sakura said, eyes still on the ground as she spoke. She swiftly raised herself, looking Kakashi into the eye. Kakashi merely looked towards the elves, raising an eyebrow. Well, who shall join the young Haruno dwarf? I shall, Sasuke said, stepping forward. Sasuke Uchiha, of the Uchiha from the west, will join you in your quest. Kakashi clapped his hands together. Well, glad that's all settled. Sasuke, you will come spend the night with me before tomorrow. Sakura, you shall go back with your clansmen for tonight. Tomorrow, after we speak with the heir, we shall come to your halls and receive you. As for the rest of you, he turned towards the group, tell your men to prepare. The hour is not at hand yet, but it is quickly approaching. You will all receive a signal from me on when to head to Konoha. In the meantime, be on the lookout for anything strange. Protect your clans. Thank you, Kakashi, Fugaku said, before approaching Sasuke. He took him by the shoulders, pressing his forehead against his. Alamine, my son, may the stars guide you safely back home. Namari, Sasuke said, glancing towards Itachi, to the both of you. May no harm befall you. Itachi smiled slightly as Fugaku rejoined his side. Sasuke walked towards Kakashi as Sakura rejoined her group, some of them clapping her on the shoulder as they began to exit the clearing. Well, we better head home, Kazashi said, have to get you prepared and whatnot for tomorrow. Kakashi and Sasuke watched as the groups left. Soon the only ones left were them and the fire. Kakashi sighed, raising his staff, the black crescent moon glowing as he sprayed water to put out the fire. We best get some rest as well. Most likely it will be the last time in a long while we will have a soft bed. A middle-aged man sat at a wooden table, staring at a piece of parchment as he drank from his mug. He groaned as he ran his fingers through his long white hair, grumbling incoherently as he stared at the blank parchment. He ignored the creaking floorboards, indicating that someone was entering the room. A young blonde appeared, yawning and stretching as he entered. Are you seriously writing your filth where we eat? He asked incredulously, heading towards the stove. The man's head snapped up in attention, his eyes squinting over at the boy. If it weren't for this filth, as you so call it, we wouldn't have anything to eat, you ignorant boy, he grumbled. It's not like you do anything useful around here. That's not true, he shouted, starting up the stove. I work with the blacksmith Iruka. I may not be as good as a dwarf, but I earn a little money here and there. Not to mention that you keep training me in swordsmanship. He waved his hand dismissively, just make me something to eat, Naruto. And don't burn it this time. Naruto grumbled, pulling out some of the salted meat as he set it into the pan. The man sighed as the smell of pork wafted to his nose. He could almost imagine the scene that he wished to write out, until knocking at the door caught his attention. You might want to get that, since I'm busy trying to not burn the meat. Naruto said, moving the meat through the pan. He groaned, pushing away from the table and heading towards the door. He opened the door, bleary eyes blinking rapidly as he adjusted to the stream of morning light. Good morning to you, Jiraiya, Kakashi greeted, waving a hand. From the top of his hat, a small black and white bird chirped in greeting. Jiraiya blinked again, before a large grin broke out over his face. "Why if it isn't Kakashi," he said, pulling the man into a hug. "I haven't seen you since you heard I finished my last novel. Have you come to try and sneak a peek at the newest one?" he questioned, waggling his eyebrows. "Oh no, I'm actually here on rather official business," Kakashi stated. Jiraiya's face fell as he realized the meaning behind his words. "It's that time, isn't it?" he asked. Kakashi merely gave a nod. Jiraiya sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well, you should come on in. Get some breakfast in you. I'll tell Naruto to put more on the stove since we'll be expecting more company, I presume." Sakura approached her father's throne, people lining the pathway as she walked. In the crowd she spotted Sasuke. He had been sent by Kakashi to ensure her safe arrival at Naruto's home, despite the fact that she knew exactly where it was since their mountain was so close to his village. "I am not pleased with this either," she remembered Sasuke saying. She stood up a bit taller, hoping that she exuded an air of confidence that would put his arrogance in place. Kazashi watched as she approached him, his face a mask of calm. On the inside though, he was nervous beyond any recognition. In his mind, he was practically sending his daughter to the slaughterhouse. But as she removed her helmet and knelt before his throne, he knew that this had to be done, for he was far too old to take on a journey like this and leave his kingdom. Whereas she, in the prime of her youth, would be able to take on the journey and most likely come back from it alive. "May the Dorni give the Gagas to go on Tharki Kakashi's journey," she said, head bent to the floor, "and in my absence, may the Dornat prosper and be safe." "Rise, my child," Kazashi said, standing from his throne, "for you have the Gagas." Sakura stood her helmet under her arm as Kazashi approached her. From a table beside the steps to the throne, he took a small bowl, filled with a purplish liquid. He pushed her hair back gently so that her forehead was clear. He then dipped his fingers into it and painted a small diamond upon her forehead. "With this mark, I ask the Varmornlos to watch over you, so that one day you may come back to these mountains and wash the mark away with our waters," he said, finishing the painting. He then set the bowl aside and hugged her tightly. She responded, knowing that this would be the last time in a while she could do this. "Be safe, my child," he whispered in her ear before releasing her. She bent to his level so that he could press a kiss on her brow. The room suddenly exploded into applause as she stood straight and, with the paint now dried, placed her helmet back on. She walked back down the aisle swiftly, knowing that there was no time to lose. Already she saw Sasuke standing at the doorway, and she wondered if he had even stopped to watch the ceremony. When she reached the doorway, she turned back and gave her clansmen a final wave goodbye before exiting the throne room. She shifted her pack on her back before looking over at Sasuke. "Let's get going," she said, beginning the journey to Naruto's home. Sasuke watched her back for a moment before following silently behind her. "You want me to do what?" Naruto asked, mouth stuffed to the brim with pork. Jiraiya grimaced, muttering something about manners under his breath. Kakashi merely stared at Naruto, his food having already been eaten. "You heard me, Naruto," Kakashi said. "I want you to go on a journey with me to save the lost city of Konoha." Naruto swallowed, taking a sip of his water as well. "Well, I mean, yeah, I heard you. But, why me? Why not ask someone else from, I dunno, an actual army? That I shall explain to you as soon as the other members of our party arrive." Kakashi said, looking out the window. "In fact, I think the ceremony is well over by now, so they should be arriving right about now." As soon as he said that, the door to the house opened, with Sakura walking in, followed by a young man dressed in a blue shirt and gray pants. He assumed that was the elf that Kakashi spoke about. "Naruto? I swear you better have saved me some pork, I'm practically starving." Naruto jumped up from the table at her voice. "Sakura," he called out, running over to her. He practically tackled her into a hug, earning a hearty laugh from her as she ruffled his hair. He pulled away for a moment, staring at her. "Does this mean you're coming on the quest as well?" "Well, why else would I be in your house, geared for an adventure?" she asked, wrapping her arm around his neck and pulling him into a headlock. He shouted out as she rubbed her gloved knuckles into his head, his arms flailing. Jiraiya carefully moved his food away from the two as Sasuke took a step away from them, edging closer to Kakashi so that he could avoid any bodily harm. "Oi, I've told you stop with the horseplay in my house," Jiraiya said, "and Naruto, introduce yourself to the young man." Just because you like living in a barn doesn't mean I raised you in one. Naruto grinned sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. Sorry Gramps, he walked over to where Sasuke stood, sticking out his hand. Name's Naruto Uzumaki. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Sasuke stared at his hand, keeping his own crossed on his chest. Sasuke, he said in a monotone voice. Naruto's blinked, taken aback by the lack of friendliness. Geez, what crawled up your ass and died? He asked, earning him laughter from Sakura and a groan from Jiraiya. Sasuke felt his eye twitch slightly as he pointed a glare towards him. I'm not fond of working with others, he stated, eyeing him, especially idiots such as yourself. Hey, who are you calling an idiot, you pointy-eared basta? Kakashi cleared his throat, catching the attention of the two. Well then, now that we've all gotten acquainted, I think it's time I gave the three of you a history lesson so that you know exactly who we're up against. And in the case of Naruto, why you were chosen for this mission, Kakashi stated, staring straight at Naruto. Naruto and Sakura sat down, while Sasuke opted to stand against a wall. Kakashi tapped some of the trinkets on his hat in a specific order before waving his hands over the table. Instantly the top of the table became misty, with events from long ago playing out on it. Naruto and Sakura's eyes widened in surprise as they leaned over to get a better look. Kakashi cleared his throat. Now then, let's begin. Long ago, during a time where there was no strife or wars, there was a great kingdom called Konoha. In this kingdom, the true ruler of the land lived. Under his rule, all the races were united, and the land was prosperous. One day however, the giant enchantress Kaguya ate from a tree in a faraway land. On that day, her soul became corrupted. She wished to rule the kingdom for her own, and so she gathered an army. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of the castle, as a young king looked over papers, his head held in his hands. He pushed away from the table, walking towards the windows to glance down at the city. From his vantage point he could see the cobblestone streets, merchants selling their wares, children playing games, and people going about their daily chores. He slammed a fist against the stone wall, teeth gritting together. I will not let her destroy this, he said under his breath, turning away from the scene. He walked towards the doorway, signaling to a servant to gather his commanders. He closed the doors, a resounding thud echoing throughout the chamber. When Kaguya ate the fruit, she begot a power that had never been seen throughout the entirety of the land. With her powers, she created a terrifying beast, the first ever dragon. With this dragon, she led her armies to attack the city, while the king's armies fought valiantly against her. Screaming could be heard as the inhabitants of Konoha ran to hide, while men in armor ran towards the gates to join the fighting outside the city's walls. Outside the city, fire was spread throughout the field as men, dwarves, and elves charged at the giants, blood flowing like a river throughout the battlefield. Kaguya watched the destruction from atop her creation, giving it orders to strike wherever there was a large group. Archers tried to take it down, but it would block their strikes with its armored body before flames billowed out of its mouth to annihilate them. The king knew that with the beast, it would be impossible to defeat her. So he devised a plan. He gathered the greatest mages of his time and with their powers combined were able to create a spell that would not kill the beast, but instead separate it into 9 different entities. These 9 entities would then be spread throughout the land. Kaguya smirked as she saw victory at hand as she saw that the Konoha forces were dwindling. Suddenly, a bright light came towards her, and before she had time to even understand what was going on, the beast below her disappeared. As she fell from the sky, she saw that 9 lights shot across the land, each going in separate directions. She slowed her descent, landing on her feet, before giving a loud cry as the army of Konoha charged forward with renewed vigor. The battle raged on, with Kaguya fighting the powerful mages while her forces fought the army. Eventually though, the might of Konoha overwhelmed the giants, forcing them to flee. Kaguya retreated, but not before casting a powerful curse on Konoha that made it uninhabitable until she was defeated. She then disappeared after her army. Many lives were lost, and although the battle was won, in the end the cost was far greater than any benefits. The king took the mages and devised a plan with them, that temples would be built guarding the 9, so that anyone who wished to use the dragons for their own gain would have to die trying. However, there would be one exception. When Kaguya would rise once again, the rightful heir would come and bring the dragons to his side. With that in mind, he assigned each mage to where the dragons resided, and then with his family left their beloved home. And now, the time has come for the rightful heir to fight for his throne, Kakashi stated, looking directly at Naruto. Naruto blinked, seeming to wake up from the daze that Kakashi's story had put him into. "Wait, you mean, I'm the heir?" he asked incredulously. Kakashi nodded, his trinkets jingling lightly his movements. Naruto looked over at Jiraiya, still stunned by the news. "Did you know?" Jiraiya snorted. "Did I know? Kid, I was a guard for your mother and father as they watched over Kurama, the dragon of Konoha. The only reason why we moved all the way out here was because once you were born, we were attacked. While we were able to save you, your parents gave up their lives to protect you." "They protected me," he whispered. "They were part of the royal family?" Jiraiya nodded. "The king's family decided that they, along with a mage, should be the ones to protect Kurama from any attacks. Right now my old sweetheart Tsunade is watching over that beast," he said, smiling perversely at the thought. "Ah, when you see her, tell her I said hi." Naruto nodded. I will," he said, before turning back to Kakashi. "So, since we've got this journey to go on, let's decide where we'll go first." Kakashi smiled, his eye crinkling. "Well, let's have a look, shall we?" He waved his hand over the table. The top suddenly became a map of the land. Sakura, Naruto, and Sasuke crowded over it, wanting to see where they would move first. "Now, as you can see, we are here," he said, pressing his finger in the center of the map, marking it with an X, smack dab in the middle of nowhere. "As for Konoha and Kurama, they reside way in the southeast over here." He pressed on a different point, causing another X to reside there. "Alright, and where are the dragons?" Naruto asked, eyes practically glued to the map. "Well, to the south we have Shukaku, in the middle of the desert. To the southwest, on an island, we have Isobu. To the west, hidden deeply behind a waterfall, we have Chome. By the lands of my clan's woods," Sasuke muttered, looking at the map. Naruto looked over at him, eyes wide. "So we might get to meet more elves?" he asked excitedly. Sasuke rolled his eyes at his excitement. "As long as they don't kill you first," he stated bluntly. Naruto audibly gulped at the thought, directing his attention back to Kakashi's explanation. "To the northwest, hidden high into the mountains above the clouds, we have Yuki. To the north, hidden behind treacherous valleys and dangerous mountains, we have Son Goku." "Ah," Sakura interjected, pushing herself closer to the map, "that's where the Oanoki's clan lives." "You know the dwarves of the north?" Kakashi asked, mildly surprised. Sakura nodded, her eyes focused on the spot. "My father and I would travel with some of our clansmen to do trading there," she explained. "I can't wait to see them again. It's been such a long time." "We're not exactly doing this journey to exchange pleasantries," Sasuke interjected, glancing over at her. Sakura rolled her eyes, looking over at him. "It would help to get on their good side if we're going to war," she countered, a frown on her lips as she looked at him. Sasuke merely grunted in response before turning his attention back to the map. "As I was saying," Kakashi said, returning to the topic, "to the northeast, hidden beyond the forests and in the caverns, lays Seiken. To the east, as far as the border goes, we have Matabi." "Hey, you said there were 9, yet I only counted 8, Naruto said, looking suspiciously up at Kakashi. "Yes, well, unfortunately Kakuya landed in Kaguya's territory, meaning that she already has one of the 9. Kakashi explained, rubbing the back of his neck. "The spell was meant to distribute them, and unfortunately Kaguya's territory is part of the land. It lies just beyond the northern mountains where, as Sakura pointed out, Oanoki's clan lives." "Well then, if she's already got one, then what are we waiting for?" Naruto shouted, standing up. "Let's go get those dragons." "It's not as simple as that, Naruto," Sakura said, shoving him back down into his seat. "We have to decide which direction to go first." "Well then let's go south and work our way clockwise throughout the land," Naruto said, pounding his fist onto the table. Sakura sighed, rubbing her temples as she looked at the rest of the group for help. "It's not a bad idea," Kakashi stated. Sakura turned her attention to Sasuke, waiting for him to speak. He merely shrugged and gathered his things, heading for the door. "The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can return to our normal lives." "Alright," Naruto shouted, jumping up, "then let's get moving." "They've begun to move, milady," a giant said, kneeling before her throne. The woman with long white hair stroked the head of the dragon splayed at her feet. Its scales sparkled like freshly fallen snow, its eyes closed in contentment. A smirk played on her lips as she decided upon her final answer. "Then we shall have to beat them to it," she stated. "Have my special forces come to me immediately. I have specific orders that I must give them." "Of course, Your Majesty," he said, bowing. He immediately left to spread the news among his ranks, closing the door behind him. She smiled, scratching underneath the chin of the dragon. "We won't let anyone disturb my plans to bring peace, will we, Kakuzu?" she asked, staring at the dragon. The dragon opened his eyes, revealing blue-green irises staring back at her as it growled its agreement. "No one shall get in your way, Lady Kaguya. I give you my word," Kakuzu telepathically spoke to her, causing a small smile to grace her lips. "I'm glad you think that way, dear," she purred. "Wonder what the boss wants us for, A young blonde man asked, looking over at his red-headed partner. A metal patch covered one blue eye, the other searching his companion's brown eyes for an answer. "I don't know," his companion began, "but since Lady Kaguya is summoning all of us, it must be something important." He finished, looking around at the small group heading towards her throne room. "Well then, I hope we get to destroy a lot of stuff," the blonde said, eye glinting in delight. "It's been a long time since we've pillaged, Sasori?" "It's never been pillaging," shouted a young man from the back of the group, silver hair glinting in the dim light. "We've always been purifying the world of heathens." "Ah, shut it, Hidan, yeah." The blonde waved his hand dismissively in his direction. "You're as bad as Kakuzu, except he actually makes a profit." "Someone has to, since slackers like you don't do anything, Didera," Kakuzu muttered, his voice slightly muffled by the mask that he was wearing. Didera turned and glared at him, a scowl on his lips. "Hey, I make beautiful pottery that I sell down in the villages, he shouts, waving his fist, "while all you do is plunder and sell stolen items. My work can be seen in the halls of kings." "Enough," a young man with spiked orange hair said as the group reached the door. "We're here." The blue-haired woman beside him pushed the doors open, revealing Kaguya sitting on her throne, Kakuzu curled by her feet. The group walked in and, once in front of her throne, knelt before her. "All hail the Lady Kaguya," they said in unison, heads bowed respectfully. "Rise," Kaguya commanded. They immediately did so, facing her. She waved her hand, mist circling in front of her. Slowly it began to solidify into a mirror. With a quick snap of her fingers, the mirror showed Kakashi and the group riding through the plains on horses, headed for the desert. "I have news that the wizard Kakashi has finally made his move to take back the city of Konoha. Thus, with the help of you, the Akatsuki, I plan to reclaim the Nine so that I may be the one to claim the city as my own." "Hey, they don't look so tough," Didera muttered, squinting at the scene, "especially the blondie and Pinky. I could probably snap their necks without them even knowing." "Do not underestimate them," Kaguya said, though her voice seemed to boom throughout the room. Didera bowed his head, stepping back in line. Sasori gave him a disdainful glance before refocusing on Kaguya. Now, Kaguya reclined back in her throne. "You will operate as either pairs or as groups, working to bring back the most compliant of the dragons. After consulting with Kakuzu, we have decided that this is the best course of action. Thus, your assignments are as follows. Sasori and Didera, go to the island in the southwest and retrieve Isobu." The scene on the mirror changed, suddenly showing a large dark blue dragon covered in spikes. It raised its head, exposing its dark purple underbelly, opening its mouth as a shower of water came shooting out of it. "Aren't dragons supposed to, shoot fire?" Didera asked, rubbing the back of his neck. Kakuzu raised his head, his body moving so that his snout was mere inches away from Didera's face. "The great dragon could do a number of different feats with Lady Kaguya's power," Kakuzu stated. "When he was split into 9 different beings, each was given a different power. His just happens to be water manipulation instead of fire." Didera said, backing up due to being unnerved by the dragon. "Can never get used to that telepathy thing, yeah," he thought to himself. "You should learn to," Kakuzu said, a smirk on his face as he returned to Kaguya's side. Didera blinked, taken aback that he had heard him. Sasori sighed as he watched the confrontation. He turned back to Kaguya and bowed. "We will leave as soon as you dismiss us, milady," he said. Kaguya smiled, stroking Kokuo's head gently. Good. Now then, to the west in the waterfalls I want Pain, Konan, and Kisame to capture Chome, she said, turning to them. The mirror showed a large green dragon with yellow wings, flying around the skies of the forest. As for the elves, I will contact Lord Danzo to see if he is willing to send forces to aid us. I assume this is acceptable? Of course, milady, the three said together, bowing. Kaguya laced her fingers together, turning to the last three before her. As for you, Hidan and Kakuzu, she waved her hand, changing the scene on the mirror. It showed an ice-blue dragon, seemingly having no eyes, resting in a cave. Go to the northeast, and bring me Seiken. I expect you two to be the first to succeed. You can count on us, Kakuzu said, bowing before her. She waved her hand, the mirror shattering before them. The glass however hovered in the air, before changing shape into small jewels. Each jewel floated towards a team, who reached out and took them. These are to get the dragons to cooperate with you, she explained, force it into their mouths, and they will follow any orders that are from me. Now go, and get me the dragons. Yes, milady, they said, before disappearing in puffs of black smoke. Kakuo looked up at her, his snout brushing against her hand. May I ask a question, Lady Kaguya? Speak, dear Kakuo, she said, stroking the top of his head. Kakuo heaved a sigh, leaning into her touch as he spoke. Why send Deidara and Sasori down to Isobu when they could easily capture Son Goku here in the north? Kaguya's lips quirked into a smirk as she looked down at the dragon, because I wish to send Kakashi a warning, as well as possibly kill those fools before their journey has even begun. Kakuo snorted, head resting in her lap. You are a strange one indeed. So Sasuke, Naruto began, tossing his head in the direction of the elf. What are the elves like? Do they eat meat? Can you do weird magic like Kakashi can? Sasuke sighed. At least an hour into their trip, Naruto had begun asking multiple questions about every topic that could even remotely relate to their quest. By now the sun had reached the middle of the sky, and Sasuke felt like his ears were about to fall off from Naruto's incessant chatter. Well, for one, he began, the elves like silence, and enjoy quietly pondering the nature of the world. He stated, hoping that Naruto would catch his drift and silence himself. However, Naruto didn't seem understand subtlety, for his face screwed up in thought for a mere moment before voicing his opinion again. Well, that sounds boring. At least the dwarves know how to throw a party. Naruto said, grinning as he remembered the feasts with the Haruno clan. But hey, answer my other questions. Yes, we eat meat, although it's not that large a part of our daily meals, Sasuke said, pinching the bridge of his nose. The sooner he answered, the sooner the blonde would be quiet. As for magic, for a human it may seem like magic, but it is nothing when compared to the feats that a true mage can perform. Naruto nodded, sincerely taking in Sasuke's words. So what you're saying is that the only special things about you are your big ears? Sakura watched the interaction. Perhaps it was a trick of the wind, but she swore she saw Sasuke's ear twitch in annoyance, almost like the pony she rode. She did however note that his hands tightened on the reins of his horse and, sensing a possible fight, decided it was time to speak up. Naruto, you Dao, she said, catching his attention. Anyone with half a mind knows that the elves have strength and speed that far surpass even the best human warrior. Not to mention that the swords they create are both the deadliest and the most beautiful weapons to be seen. You've seen our craftsmanship? Sasuke asked, eyebrow quirked in question. She shook her head, hands fiddling with her reins. Not in person, she explained. There were some books scattered throughout the village and halls of the mountain, but whenever the blades were described it sounded breathtaking. Sasuke smirked to himself, feeling a slight swell in his ego at having someone admit their work was better. Perhaps, if there are any times of relaxation, I shall show you my blade. Sakura's eyes lit up, causing another boost to his ego. You'd be willing to show me? Hey, can I see it too? Naruto asked, eyes equally wide. Sasuke scowled, glancing over in his direction. A few minutes ago you thought the only thing I contributed to the world was my ears, he said pointedly. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, a sheepish look on his face. Well yeah, but that was before I found out all this cool stuff, Naruto explained, which, by the way, you should have just told me when I asked. Perhaps if you were quieter, I'd be more willing. Well, maybe if you were friendlier, I'd be quieter. Sakura sighed, rubbing her temples. A long journey lies ahead of us. Far in the west, an elderly man walked away from a meeting room, a cane supporting his weight. The murmured sounds of voices floated towards his ears. His right eye was covered in bandages, black hair falling over it somewhat. The white robes he wore moved silently with him as he moved throughout the halls towards his room. As he reached the door, he took out his keys. Inserting them into the lock, he glanced slightly behind him as he opened the door. "I trust that you'll ensure I have absolute solitude," he asked aloud. A pale man dressed in a black cloak appeared from the shadows, a slight smile on his face. "You have nothing to fear, Lord Danzo," he said, his black hair peeking out from beneath his hood. Danzo merely grunted in response, entering the room. "My boy, I've moved beyond having fears." Kaguya watched as the mirror sparked to life, the face of Danzo appearing before her. Kakuzu bowed his head as he appeared, Danzo mirroring the action. "You wish to speak with me, Kaguya?" "Kakashi has begun his quest," she stated. "I have already sent my men to their locations, and one of them happens to be close to your domain. Your men need assistance in obtaining Chome of the West?" Danzo asked, eyebrow raised. Kaguya smirked slightly. "It is not Chome I need assistance in, rather, it is the pesky Uchiha that guard the area. They are a rather annoying group, and they've already given their allegiance to Kakashi. Therefore you desire them to be eliminated." "I desire nothing in this world, Lord Danzo," Kaguya said. "I expect their elimination to occur. Otherwise, you can consider our agreement annulled." Danzo bowed his head. "Of course, Lady Kaguya. I shall send my best troops to meet your men." "Very good," Kaguya nodded, lacing her hands in her lap. "Also, as you may have guessed, Kakashi's group will come through that area. Traveling in the group is an Uchiha elf." "You wish for an ambush in the Uchiha forest?" Kaguya smirked again. "As I said before, Lord Danzo. I don't wish or desire, I expect." Naruto yawned, slumping slightly in his seat as they continued on towards a town that, according to Kakashi, should be visible any moment now. He rubbed his eyes as he looked around. Trees and grass had become much sparser, and in their places stood sand and boulders. As a result of the lack of shade, the sun seemed to be beating down harsher on them, though Sakura seemed to be the only one not affected by the increase in heat. He moved around in his saddle, trying to get a glimpse of Kakashi at the front. "Are we there yet?" Naruto whined. "We've been traveling for days now, and my butt hurts a lot." "We'll be there any moment now," Kakashi repeated. The small bird, which Naruto soon learned was named Rin, looked back at him and chirped. Naruto groaned, throwing his head back. "But that's what you said the last time. Whining isn't going to get us there any faster, Naruto," Sakura stated, casting a glance back at Naruto. He narrowed his eyes at her, pouting slightly at her frown. "Well, sorry if we weren't all raised in the heat of the forges," Naruto countered. "Besides, even Sasuke looks like he wants to pass out." "Do not put me in the same category as you, idiot," Sasuke said, glaring at him. His face was obviously flushed, despite not having complained as much as Naruto. Naruto glared back at him in return. "Stop acting like you're better than us. Then stop reinforcing that belief. Will the both of you shut it?" Sakura snapped, whirling around to face them. "Before I come back there and make you be quiet?" Naruto paled, audibly swallowing at the thought. "Oh, of course, Sakura. We'd hate to make you do more than you have to, right, Sasuke?" Sasuke scoffed, "As if a dwarf like you could force me to do anything." Sakura glared at him. "Are you insinuating that you're stronger than me, daughter of Kazashi Haruno, leader of the dwarves beneath the Cherry Mountains?" Out of the corner of his eye, Sasuke could see Naruto waving his arms wildly, attempting to signal him to stop talking. Instead, Sasuke merely smirked as he matched her gaze. "I'm merely insinuating that I wouldn't want to make a girl cry when she fails to beat me." Sakura's brow furrowed as Naruto groaned. "Well then, how about a challenge, for when we get to the next town?" "Sakura, I really think," Naruto began, but was interrupted by Sasuke. "What kind of challenge do you have in mind, dwarf? Sasuke, you really don't want to egg her on. I mean, she's gonna. It will be a test of strength," Sakura announced, facing forward again. "Simple. Yet it shall prove which one of us is more capable in making the other bow to their whims, Dekel. Guys, really, can't we all just hold hands and—" Fine, Sasuke said, riding up next to her. "Just promise not to cry when I beat you at your own game, Nagram." Sakura huffed, clicking her heels against her pony's sides. She moved farther ahead, prompting Sasuke to follow her. Naruto groaned, running his hands down his face as he looked at his horse. "She's gonna break his arm tonight, isn't she, Gamma?" he asked aloud. Gamma merely snorted as he followed after the trio ahead of them. "Man, are we fucking there yet?" Hidan complained, running a hand through his silver hair. "We haven't seen another person in weeks." "According to the map, the temple of Seiken is at the top of the mountain," Kakuzu murmured, glancing up at the peak. It was covered in clouds, hidden from their view. From what they could tell though, it would get colder as they went up, judging by the snow that they could see. Hidan groaned, throwing his head back. "So you're telling me we have to get off the horses and fucking climb?" "We'll be at the top by nightfall," Kakuzu stated, continuing onward. Hidan threw his hands in the air angrily as he followed after him. "If I get frostbite, I'm fucking sacrificing you to Jashin, asshole." "Fuck this shit." "Quite a mouth on that one, Utakata," Seiken noted, lazily looking in the direction of a young man dressed in robes that matched the icy blue of his scales. Utakata hummed in response, blowing a bubble from his pipe as he watched the duo in the large bubble. "It is rather chilled up here," he stated calmly, removing the pipe from his mouth. He felt a rush of air as Seiken exhaled through his nostrils, resting his head closer to Utakata. "You've never complained before." "I'm not complaining, just merely making an observation." Seiken yawned, teeth glinting in the light that was offered in the room. Observations tend to be made only when it is pleasing to the eye or unpleasant to the senses. "Which is why we're watching these two," Utakata said, moving them back to the topic at hand. "You say they are Kaguya's men?" Seiken nodded, resting his head on his claws. "Kakuo has either forgotten that we are all linked, or he is trying to make amends. It's not his fault he landed in Kaguya's territory," Utakata pointed out, bringing the pipe to his lips. "Rather it's the wizard's fault for not creating incantations that had specific locations for each of you. Pretty careless if you ask me. If we were unlucky, all of you could have ended up in Kaguya's lands. Magical trajectory estimation is quite harder than you imagine," Seiken noted as Utakata blew multiple bubbles. "They couldn't control it, unlike you and your bubbles." "Yes, well, it was rather on the spot," Utakata said, watching the bubbles float in the air. He snapped his fingers, creating a blizzard within the confines of them. He swiped his hand through the air, causing them to move towards the larger bubble that showed Kakuzu and Hidan now leading the horses up the mountain, the path having become too dangerous to ride on. He flicked them into the larger one. Instantly, snow began falling on the duo, the wind picking up as it blew their cloaks in every direction. Utakata smirked as he heard Hidan shout obscenities. "That should keep them busy for a little bit," he said, standing up from his sitting position. He began heading farther into the cave, prompting Seiken to stand and follow him, both walking deeper into the darkness. Utakata's voice echoed in the cave as they turned a corner towards their destination. "Let us prepare a proper welcome for our guests." "Kakuzu," Hidan roared over the howling wind. "I swear to fucking Jashin that after this is over, your head is mine." "Quiet," Kakuzu snapped back, "your shouting keeps spooking the horses." "Oh, like this fucking blizzard from hell isn't doing just as good a job," Hidan retorted. He growled as his horse pawed nervously at the ground, its skin rippling each time hail hit it. He tugged the horse forward along the path, careful to stay as far away from the edge as possible. Kakuzu rolled his eyes, stroking his horse's nose as he continued onward just as carefully. "While the blizzard isn't helping us, it is a sign that we're close." "How is it a sign that we're close?" Hidan shouted, pulling his hood over his head again. The wind however instantly knocked it back off, earning a string of curses from Hidan. "Because it means that they can see us," Kakuzu said, trudging through the snow, "and if they can see us, that means we're within the range of their magic." "Don't they have control over this whole mountain?" "Yes," Kakuzu admitted, "but the closer we get, the more magic he'll use, which will result in harsher conditions." Hidan grinned maniacally at the thought of reaching the top. "And the more magic he uses, the more tired he'll be. Meaning it will be that much easier to tip him apart limb from fucking limb." Hidan's voice echoed throughout the mountain. In the distance, a rumbling could be heard. Kakuzu sighed, looking back at him. "Sounds like we'll be digging our way to the top in a moment." "Alright, this is where we'll stop for tonight," Kakashi said, stopping in front of an inn. The outside looked dingy, the sign proclaiming it as such practically falling off its hinges. Naruto wrinkled his nose, eyes squinting as well. Looks rundown, Naruto commented. Kakashi sighed as he led his horse forward, the rest of the group following suit. Well Naruto, considering that Suna is on the edge of a desert, this inn probably doesn't get many visitors, Kakashi explained, handing his reins to a stable boy. And the visitors they do get only care about the ale, Sakura added in, taking off her helmet and shaking her hair free. Well, as long as they have a soft bed and something to eat, it's all fine by me, Naruto said, dismounting from his horse. Sasuke did the same, approaching Sakura as he led his horse to the stables. So then, what is this challenge that you wish to partake in, he asked, looking at her. A good old-fashioned arm wrestling match, Sakura announced, grinning as she flexed her bicep, slapping a gloved hand on it. 'Tis a true test of strength if you can beat a dwarf in this match. HMPH, count me out then, Sasuke said, heading the stables. Sakura stared at him, mouth slightly agape. She regained her composure and angrily followed him. What do you mean, count me out? She demanded. You agreed to this challenge. I agreed to a challenge, not an uncouth childish escapade, Sasuke clarified, putting his horse in the stable. He closed the stall door, stroking the horse's nose. The horse leaned into his touch, whinnying softly. Sakura crossed her arms over her chest, cheeks puffed out. HMPH, guess the old saying is true, she muttered, wherever there are elves, there are lies. And dwarves are as hard-headed as stone, he retorted as he passed by her. If you wish to engage in a real challenge, just let me know. Sakura growled, suddenly grabbing his upper arm and spinning him around to face her. Naruto cried out as she grasped Sasuke by the collar, pulling him in close to her face, their foreheads almost touching. Look here you pompous ass, she spat through gritted teeth. I've reached out to you with a challenge between comrades. While clashing swords is always a good way to get to know someone, in times like these, a simple affair over a pint of ale works just as well. He stared at her indifferently. I never asked for your camaraderie. I merely want to get this over with as quickly as possible, without having to spend much time with either of you. You little, Sakura pulled her fist began, only to be halted by Kakashi grasping her arm. Enough, Sakura, he said, separating the two, why don't we all go get settled into the room? I've made sure it's big enough that nobody has to be in anyone's breathing space tonight. Even being in the same village as him is far too close, Sakura scoffed, heading inside. Kakashi sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he followed her in. Sasuke watched, merely brushing himself off and straightening his clothes. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Naruto asked, coming up beside Sasuke. Sasuke glanced over at him, an eyebrow raised. As if she could kill me, he said, beginning to head inside. Naruto grabbed his arm, pulling him back to his side, earning an annoyed glare from Sasuke. No Sasuke, I mean it. I grew up near her clan, and turning down an offer like that is almost as bad as insulting her dad. Why should I care? He asked, ripping his arm from Naruto's grip. Naruto looked at him exasperatedly, almost as if he were a child asking the same question for the 100th time. Because we're probably going to be on this quest for a very long time, Naruto shouted. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Look, if you're not willing to do it for the fact of making friends, then do it for the fact that when we get stuck in a battle she's going to save your ass. Sasuke merely grunted, heading inside. Naruto stared at his retreating form in disbelief. He threw his hands into the air before plopping himself onto the ground. Those two are gonna be the inadvertent death of me, Naruto whined. The wind howled as the blizzard continued to rage. Hidan grasped at the entrance to the cave, eyelashes and hair covered in frost and ice. Kakuzu brushed the snow off his cloak, lighting a torch. About time you got in here, Kakuzu muttered, heading inwards. Hidan followed after him, leaving his horse next to Kakuzu's. You fucking ditched me, Hidan said in disbelief. After all the shit we've been through, you fucking ditched me on the top of a mountain. In a blizzard, nonetheless. It was either that or I spear you through the heart, Kakuzu shrugged, and you enjoyed that far too much last time, so I figured this was a much more suitable punishment. How did I get so fortunate to have you as a partner? Hidan drawled sarcastically, walking beside Kakuzu. Because the both of us would kill anyone else, he stated. Hidan shrugged, following him as they continued down the passageway. As they walked, Hidan noted that the air was damp and chilled, making it more difficult to breathe. The walls seemed to be closing in, and with the heaviness of the air it almost seemed that the entire cavern was closing in on him. As he was wondering what it would feel like to be crushed by air, Kakuzu stopped suddenly, causing him to run into his back. A little warning would have been nice, Hidan grumbled, rubbing his forehead. Kakuzu ignored him, focusing on something unforeseen. "Do you hear that?" he murmured. Hidan looked at him, eyebrow raised. "Hear what?" Kakuzu ignored the question, snapping his fingers. In an instant, the fire on the torch was set to hidden torches in the walls, revealing that their narrow passageway was actually a circular room. Hidan looked around, examining how the room was covered in different glyphs. He recognized it as the old language used by wizards in writings for spells and protection. "Wonder what this is all about," Hidan wondered aloud. Kakuzu kept his eyes straight ahead, his body tense. Hidan noticed and followed his gaze. Standing in the center of the room stood a golem made of what appeared to be ice. The creature turned its gaze towards them, its eye sockets emitting an eerie green-blue light. "Who goes there?" it rumbled, its voice practically shaking the cavern. Hidan drew his scythe, his body tensing as well while Kakuzu formulated a plan. "Hidan," he finally said, "I'll need distractions." Hidan grinned, "I'm your man." He charged at the creature, scythe raised behind him. It roared, swinging one of its massive hands in his direction. He jumped upwards, dodging the fist as it crashed into the ground and landing on its arm. He ran up the beast, scythe dragging behind him. Powder from the ice flew out behind him, the blade leaving deep crevices in the ice. The golem swung his other hand towards Hidan, going to grab him in an attempt to crush him. Hidan noticed the hand coming towards him and dug his scythe into the ice. As the hand came swinging towards him, he vaulted back, his hands holding onto the staff of the scythe. "Hey, gonna have to try harder than that," he said, grinning as he swung to the ground. He yanked his scythe from where it was lodged, leaving behind 3 gouges in the arm. He raised the scythe and swung, effectively chopping off a few fingers from the beast. The golem roared in pain, the light in its eyes growing brighter. A light began to grow from its open mouth, Hidan watching in fascination. Suddenly, the light shot out from its mouth, causing Hidan to leap off the arm to avoid the blast. He looked back over his shoulder to see that the gouges he had created were suddenly coated over in ice. "Sweet Jashin," he shouted, looking back at Kakuzu, "this thing shoots ice." "I noticed," Kakuzu said, his concentration not breaking. His mind formed the words as his hands continued their movements. He felt the power flowing through him as he continued watching the battle. "Just keep him distracted." "Right," Hidan muttered, looking back at the beast, distracted. It stood, its head barely touching the ceiling. It began walking towards Hidan, its foot rising in an attempt to crush him. Hidan dodged, the falling foot creating a massive dust cloud in its wake. He grunted, glancing up at the golem, trying to figure out how the best way to fight it now that it was standing. The golem continued its advance towards Kakuzu, determined to destroy anything in its path. "Fuck," Hidan shouted, running towards it. He jumped off the ground, swinging his scythe so that it lodged itself in the lower back of the golem. It roared, its body swaying and arms swinging behind it to try and dislodge him. Hidan held tightly to his handle, waiting until a hand came close to him. He then dragged his scythe across the back, swinging so that he landed on the wrist of it. It swung its arm into the wall, attempting to crush him against the rocks. Hidan swung and hung to the other side of the arm that hadn't been smashed, clinging desperately to the slippery ice. With each swing of the arm, Hidan felt his grip loosen, until finally he went flying across the room, his scythe still lodged in its arm. He crashed into the far wall, groaning as he slid down the rocks. He looked up, watching as it began to advance on him. As it reached the center of the room, the golem was suddenly engulfed in flames that were shot from each torch in the room. It roared as it was melted, slowly becoming nothing more than a puddle in the floor with Hidan's scythe in the middle. "You couldn't have done that any sooner," Hidan panted, glancing over at Kakuzu. Kakuzu waved his hands, moving the water into the air. With a snap of his fingers it was dispersed into a mist that covered the room. Hidan stood up, groaning as he walked over to his scythe. "I had to wait for the right moment," Kakuzu muttered. Hidan picked up his scythe, stretching his back afterwards. In the silence of the room they heard clapping, turning, They both saw as Yu Takata walked into the room, carrying his bubble pipe. Very good, he murmured, eyeing the both of them, but that is to be expected of Kaguya's men. Hidan grinned, getting into a crouched position. Alright Kakuzu, now it's time for you to be the distraction. Sasuke hated the tavern that the inn offered. It was loud, smelled of drunken men who had no dignity, and had dim lighting that could practically be considered darkness. He couldn't understand how Naruto, Kakashi, and Sakura were having such a wonderful time in this disgusting place. He watched as Naruto threw back an ale, getting claps on the back from other men for being able to hold his pint. He watched as Kakashi quietly sat in the corner, seemingly sleeping but always alert, thanks to Rin who sat on his shoulder. The one he hadn't been watching though was the one he should have been watching the closest, considering that she was the only female of their group. Did you just call me a wench? Sakura shouted, grabbing a man by the collar of his shirt. Course I did, the man slurred, the only girls here are the ones serving the ales or serving the males. A roar of laughter rose from the men surrounding them. Sakura gritted her teeth as she suddenly gave the man a hard headbutt. The men around them laughed even louder as he fell back on the floor, clearly unconscious from the hit. Men clapped her on the shoulder, congratulating her on the hit, telling her that somebody needed to knock some sense into him. You see what I mean now, Naruto commented, snapping Sasuke out of his thoughts. He looked back at the blonde, noticing that his cheeks were flushed and there was a glaze to his eyes. He rolled his eyes, directing his attention back to the activities of the tavern. You've had too much to drink, he stated. Naruto groaned, plopping down next to Sasuke and swinging his arm around his shoulder, much to Sasuke's chagrin. But you see it, don't ya? He asked, the smell of alcohol strong on his breath. This is how she bonds with people. Sasuke grunted, quite a different tactic than the elves. Well, we all can't be as high and mighty as you, Naruto said, slapping him on the back. Sasuke rolled his eyes, glancing over at him. What was your purpose coming over to me anyway? He asked. Naruto scratched his head, looking up at the ceiling as if it held the answers he sought after. Dunno, I think to tell Ya to give her a chance or something, he mumbled. Sasuke pushed Naruto's forehead, causing him to sprawl backwards on the bench, a stupid grin on his face. He stood up, heading over to where Sakura sat drinking and talking with the other patrons. Her eyes narrowed as she looked up at him, arms immediately crossing over his chest. What do you want? She asked, her legs crossed as well. Sasuke mentally sighed, not believing that he was about to actually undergo this childish ordeal. I accept your challenge from earlier, he muttered, sitting across from her. He saw as her scowl changed into a grin as she turned to face him. Ah, so you've finally gathered the courage to test your strength against the Haruno dwarf, she said, resting her elbow on the table, arm ready. He rolled his eyes, his hand clasping hers as he positioned himself. Let's just get this over with. So we've a wrestling match over air, a man shouted, turning to watch. I'll be the judge, to make sure none of you's cheatin'. Ready when you are, Sakura said, the grin still on her face. Sasuke rolled his eyes as the man counted down. He placed enough force in his hand that he believed should be able to keep her at a standstill for a little bit. As the man said the number 1, he clenched his hand around hers and pushed. To his astonishment though, in a few seconds she had already slammed his hand down into the table, earning her cheers from the other patrons. You cheated, Sasuke accused, eyes narrowing. Sakura stuck her tongue out, eyes twinkling in the firelight of the lamps. A dwarf never cheats, my friend, she said, but to soothe your bruised ego, how about we give it another go? Fine by me, he said, readying himself. She clasped his hand again, staring straight into his eyes. He ignored the crowd that had gathered around them, opting instead to focus on how the determination in her eyes and the lamplight seemed to bring a sparkle to her eyes that reminded him of the stars from home. For a moment, as they began counting down, he wondered what her eyes would be like with the fire of anger at having lost to him of all people. But as quickly as the thought came it left, leaving him to focus on the task at hand, beating Sakura at her challenge. The tavern from the night before was less busy, though there were still quite a few people coming in for food and the rare drink. Sitting at a table with large plates of food eating jovially was Naruto and Sakura. Kakashi merely smiled and nodded politely, while Sasuke sulked next to him. Sakura, you really showed everyone here last night, Naruto grinned, I've never seen so many guys get flipped just from an arm wrestling contest. Sakura puffed her chest out, looking triumphant. Well, after seeing a dwarf beat an elf twice in a row, of course they'd want to try their luck. And then they all started placing bets. Naruto laughed. I can't believe there were still people thinking their friends could beat you. It was quite a feat, Kakashi admitted, his plate already empty. Many people in the tavern wondered how he had eaten without removing his mask. Others that knew better seemed in awe of his features. Sasuke merely grunted, his arms crossed over his chest. Sakura grinned, reaching over to lightly tap him on the arm. Ah, don't feel bad, Sasuke, she said. 100 or so years without having to fight against something stronger than another elf will make anyone a little soft in the arms. I'm anything but soft, Sasuke retorted. Sakura merely shrugged, returning to her food. If you say so, she replied, but the results would prove otherwise. He merely glared in her direction as Naruto laughed. Kagaya glanced upwards at the door as it opened. Entering was Kakuzu, Hidan nowhere in sight. I assume you were successful? Kagaya questioned, her chin resting on her fist. Kakuzu nodded. And Utakata? He is dead, my lady, Kakuzu answered, Hidan entering the room. Kagaya smirked, her other hand resting on Kokuo's head. Ah, then why not come in, my dear Seiken? The room shook slightly as the dragon walked. He turned towards her voice, his unseeing eyes staring straight into hers. Seiken bowed, his head touching the ground as the rest of his body arched accordingly. It is a privilege to serve you, Kagaya, he spoke, his eyes looking up towards hers. Kagaya smiled, standing from her throne and walking towards him, Kakuo following behind her respectfully. She placed her hand on his head gently, stroking him gently. A growl of approval rumbled deep in Seiken's chest. And it is a privilege for you to join us, Seiken of the Northeast, Dragon of Corrosion, Kagaya said gently. With you on our side we will surely bring peace to this corrupted world, and once again we may all walk the earth freely. Seiken heaved a sigh, eyes closing at the thought. A lifetime of being closed away from the world. How I dreamed to fly the skies freely, showing that I was truly in charge of my life. And you shall, soon enough, love, Kagaya cooed softly, stroking his head. Seiken leaned into her touch. However, I will need you to do something for me, so that our dreams may merge with this wretched reality. He looked up into her eyes. Anything for my liberator, she smiled. I need you to merge with Kakuo, with your powers combined into one being, nothing can stop us. Our minds will merge as one, Kakuo added, we will be together again, like how it was always supposed to be. Seiken smiled to himself, remembering times that were never lonely before the split. Yes, he stopped mid-sentence, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind bothering him. A faded memory of a young man with black hair, smoking a pipe that always produced bubbles appeared. Nights on a lonely, cold mountain that were never actually cold or lonely. Kagaya noticed his hesitation, concern written across her face. What is it, dear Seiken? She asked, kneeling before him. He flinched from her touch, backing away slightly. Utakata? He groaned, shaking his head. Where am I? What have you done to him? Utakata. Seiken spat acid towards her. Kagaya dodged, her robes billowing around her as the liquid singed the floor. Kakuo roared, charging towards Seiken. He rammed into the other dragon, knocking him on the ground. Seiken roared and thrashed, working to try and remove Kakuo from him. Kagaya quickly approached them, avoiding the acid on the floor. She knelt before Seiken, cradling his head in her lap as he thrashed. Pomeria Bjartskuller, she whispered. Seiken halted his thrashing, looking towards her in awe. Kagaya smiled, stroking up his head as she continued to speak. Bjartskuller, she repeated, Etrum erni maninar orya. Frikai onr aka edr. Seiken's body relaxed as he rested against her lap, her fingers continuing to stroke his scales. Slowly his mind began to come back to him. All fanciful images of a young man vanished with her words. You speak the truth, he murmured, looking up at her. She nodded, brushing a strand of hair away from his face. I never speak lies in the language of old, she replied. Now please, Seiken, will you help me to save this wretched world? Seiken's eyes closed as her fingers continued working. I will merge with Kakuo for you. She smiled, bending down and placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. Thank you, Bjartskuller. I still don't get why you're not wearing your armor into the desert, Naruto said, climbing onto his horse. What if we run into enemies or monsters out there? Sakura sighed as she finished securing her pack to her pony. Naruto, I've already told you. We're more likely to die from heat than from enemies. Therefore, to reduce the risk, I've decided to not wear the armor. But you work in the forges in those clothes. Yes, in these clothes, she said, yanking at the simple black shirt that she wore. Wearing armor in the forges would not only kill us, but it would ruin some of our more intricate patterns on our armor. Naruto huffed as they began to leave the stables, heading towards the desert. They walked quietly through the village. Some of the inhabitants looked at them curiously. Others blatantly pointed and stared, some at Kakashi's trinkets, others at Sasuke, and mainly men staring at Sakura. Naruto pouted, knowing that none of them were looking at him since he was the most normal in appearance out of the four of them. As they neared the edge of the village, an idea occurred to Naruto. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, Sakura cut him off. No, Naruto, I will not take off the rest of my clothes. Naruto frowned, throwing his head back in frustration. Ah, come on. You're so worried about heat, taking off the rest of your clothes will make you feel even less hot. While that may be true, Sakura began, it will also remove any barriers between my skin and the sun, giving me horrendous burns. Naruto groaned, pouting again. But I'm sure Sasuke would become friends with you real quick. Ain't that right, Sasuke? An elf knows better than to be tempted by flesh, Sasuke responded, causing Sakura to smirk in triumph. Naruto merely threw his hands into the air, slumping in his seat as he gave up on making the ride interesting as they entered the desert. They've made it into the desert, a large beige dragon asked, curled around himself. His body was covered in purple markings, his eyes shining a bright yellow from the dark rings surrounding them. A young red-haired man nodded, his legs crossed in front of him. They have just entered, so their presence is still weak, he said. However, when they stop at nightfall, we shall ensure that they do not make it any farther. Why not kill them now? The dragon demanded, his tail swishing behind him. The man looked back, teal eyes meeting the yellow. Because our combined magic does not reach them at this distance, he replied. You of all people should know this, Shukaku. Shukaku growled, curling inward more. I despise trespassers in my lands, especially ones that work for Kaguya. They will be dealt with soon enough, he said, facing frontwards again. You must be patient, Shukaku. Patience was never one of my virtues, Gaara, he growled, eyes closing. As the day passed, Naruto's group made progress through the desert, encountering nothing out of the ordinary. Far off in Kaguya's territory though, the preparations for the ceremony were finally completed by nightfall. Kaguya smiled as she observed her handiwork. Runes covered the walls and floors, each having a specific meaning for the bonding. She glanced over at the door, seeing Kakuzu standing guard. Let them in, she commanded. Kakuzu nodded, opening the great doors. Through them came Seiken and Kakuo, walking side by side together towards her. She gestured towards the center of the room, indicating that they were to stand there. They followed her hand, eventually reaching the center and facing her. Kaguya knelt to the floor, hands clasped together as she closed her eyes, the moonlight shining upon her hair as she began to utter the incantation. Deloy abr berthro, bjartskalera riza, Kaguya began. As she spoke, different runes became illuminated, the room becoming brighter as she continued. Brissinger abr berthro, bjartskalera lifa. Vanyali fra de j, bjartskalera atha. The dragons roared as the runes flew off the wall, circling around them as she uttered the last word. Slowly the runes from the floor rose as well, encapsulating the two dragons within a magic sphere. The runes began advancing towards the dragons, some already beginning to stick to their scales. As the space became smaller, the dragons began to move closer together, until they almost seemed to be one being. Soon the dragons could not be seen, as the runes flew together to form a black wall. Kaguya's eyes suddenly flew open, her palms slamming onto the ground as she shouted the final words. Pomneria Vanyali fra bjartskalera Malthina. The sphere condensed suddenly, seemingly collapsing in on itself. A great roar was heard before the sphere exploded, the black walls shattering into nothing more than dust. In the center of the room where Kakuo and Seiken stood a singular dragon, its form more impressive than the two dragons alone. Its scales seemed to glimmer like diamonds. the moonlight causing it to look like it was covered in silver stars. It opened its eyes, revealing light blue eyes that stared directly into Kaguya's. "You have recreated me, Lady Kaguya," it noted, a hint of approval in its voice. Kaguya merely smiled, standing up slowly from the ground. "It was my pleasure, Geto. I can't feel Seiken or Kakuo anymore," Shukaku said, watching Gaara meditate. Gaara glanced back at him, an eyebrow raised in question. "Does that mean they've been merged?" Gaara asked. Shukaku looked down at his claws, flexing them in uncertainty. "It means they've either been merged, or they're no longer with us," he finally responded after a few moments. Gaara nodded, standing up from his pose and clasping his hands together. "Well then, we might as well stop that group before they get any closer," he said. A chill wind whipped around him, his hair and clothes flying. He pushed his hands away from his body, causing the wind to spread out of the room and out into the night. Shukaku watched through narrow eyes as Gaara sat back down, resuming his pose. "You think setting the temperatures below freezing will stop them?" he huffed. "You should send 1,000 sandstorms after them." "We must bide our time," Gaara said. "The desert is vast, and we do not know their specific location. Therefore, we must reserve our powers so that when they get closer, we can definitely eliminate them." Shukaku merely snorted his disapproval as he closed his eyes, the chill of the night already setting in. Naruto shivered again as the wind blew. He turned around and began digging through his pack, looking for the wool cloak that he wore at the start of the trip. He found it, wrapping it tightly around himself in the hopes that it would warm him. The wind blew again, the chill harsher this time, causing him to shiver again as it hit any exposed skin. He glanced at Sakura. Despite being wrapped in her cloak, she was shivering as well, though for some reason Sasuke and Kakashi seemed to be unaffected. "Can we stop for the night?" Naruto called out, scrunching his shoulders so that his chin was shielded by the cloak. "It's gotten really cold, and I don't think Sakura or I are built for this kind of weather." Kakashi glanced back, noticing for the first time that the two of them were shivering. "Ah, of course. I forgot that neither of you had cloaks enchanted for the elements." Naruto blinks. "You can do that? It is a simple spell, sung as the item is created," Sasuke explained as they stopped. "Elves commonly use it for our cloaks so that we can survive any weather." "Well, I hope you brought a couple extra, 'cause Sakura and I are freezing over here," Naruto exclaimed, jumping down from his horse. "TCH, the only thing I can spare is an extra blanket." Kakashi turned to face them, finished setting up his sleeping area. "I've extra room in my cloak for someone who wishes to join me." He offered a smile on his face. Naruto grimaced, imagining spending a night lying beside Kakashi. "No offense, but I think I might have to pass on that one." "We could always fight for Sasuke's blanket, Naruto," Sakura said, walking up beside him. "Nothing complicated, just perhaps a good bit of horseplay. It would set the blood on fire real quick." "No way," Naruto said. "Last time we engaged in horseplay, you nearly broke my rib. I'd rather sleep next to the old man than fight you." Sakura grinned as Kakashi frowned, a slight protest at the jab towards his age being heard. "Well then, it's settled. I get the blanket, and you get Kakashi." Naruto grumbled his protests, grabbing his pack and stomping his way towards Kakashi. Sakura smiled, unhooking her sleeping mat and spreading it on the ground. As she positioned her pack to act as a pillow, a rolled-up dark green blanket was thrown in her direction. She looked up in the direction it was thrown in, seeing that Sasuke had finished setting up his mat as well. "Don't destroy it," was all that Sasuke said before lying down on his mat. Sakura smiled, unfurling the blanket and lying down as well. As she covered herself with the blanket, she caught a scent of damp earth and rich flowers. She blinked, looking at the blanket in wonder. "Does this smell like his home?" she wondered, still staring at the blanket. She relaxed, a soft smile spreading across her face as she lay down, her head resting on her pack. "I wish to see it now," she thought to herself. It was the last thought she had before drifting off into a peaceful sleep. Shukaku growled as he paced back and forth, his tail flicking across the floor irritably. Gaara sighed as he felt another rush of wind from Shukaku opening and closing his wings. He felt the dragon's desire to go out and kill the group, but as they got closer he knew that it would be best to let the elements kill them. "Then why aren't they dead yet?" Shukaku roared, glaring at Gaara. "Each day we have sent scorching winds to them. Each night, the temperatures drop below freezing. We had to go out and… No, Gaara stated, turning to glare back at Shukaku. We stay here and do what we can. We are not confronting the enemy. Shukaku roared, his claw striking towards Gaara. Gaara jumped backwards as a large stream of sand shot up from the ground towards him. Shukaku opened his mouth, a blast of air hitting the sand and creating a miniature sandstorm within the room. Gaara merely stood in the center of it all as Shukaku blended in with the sand, circling around him menacingly. I am the ruler of this land, he growled, without me you are nothing but a little boy pretending to be a mage. You should be grateful that I give you some of my power to help beat back enemies, to help your pathetic species survive in this land. Gaara exhaled silently, eyes closing in concentration. As he focused his energy, he could sense Shukaku prowling on his right, watching his every movement with his golden eyes. Gaara raised his hands. As they rose, the howling of the wind ceased as the sand stood still in the air. Suddenly, he moved his hands in the direction of Shukaku, prompting the sand to follow. Shukaku roared as the sand pelted him, slowly creating chains that traveled across his body, strapping him down to the floor. He struggled, wings flapping as he tried to break free from the bonds. A frustrated roar left his mouth. Gaara calmly approached him, teal eyes staring him down as he continued to thrash. Release me, he shouted, this is no way to treat your savior. You're right, Gaara stated, however, you are not our savior. That title belongs to the mage that first controlled and protected you. With your power, he created our village, he is our savior. Shukaku quieted down as Gaara continued speaking, if you do not wish to help us, that is your own decision. But, you should be warned, if we die, so do you. What do you need from me? Shukaku asked, finally conceding to the situation at hand. Gaara's lips twitched upwards slightly, turning his back on the dragon. Strong winds, Gaara noted, strong enough to lift even boulders from the ground. And what will you do? Shukaku questioned as the sand receded from his body. Gaara sat on the ground, crossing his legs in a meditative pose. He placed his hands together and closed his eyes. I will do my best to crush them from here, he replied, focusing his energy. Content with the answer, Shukaku stood, shaking himself free of any sand particles. He faced towards the entryway, inhaling. He suddenly exhaled, the wind blasting the doors open as it rushed across the desert. The sand lifted from the ground and followed its path, more and more of it gathering as it sped across the land. Shukaku walked in a circle, finally curling in on himself as he lay down. This better work, mage, Shukaku growled, eyes closing in concentration to control the wind. Naruto panted, hand blocking his forehead as he trudged forward through the sand. They had been traveling through the desert for what seemed like an eternity, when in reality it had only been a few days since they left the village. After their freezing first night, they had a blistering day in the desert, followed by another freezing night. The pattern continued, with today being no different. Kakashi had noted that it was perhaps the work of Shukaku's guardian and that as a result, they should keep their guard up at all times. Guard up all the time my ass, Naruto thought to himself, shooting a glare over at Kakashi. He was slumped forward on his horse, fast asleep, hat tipped forward so as to keep the sun out of his eyes. During the trip, he had used his magic to keep their canteens filled with water so as to not suffer from dehydration. However, according to him, it wore him out incredibly, thus requiring him to sleep more often. Naruto had a sneaking suspicion that he was just exhausted like the rest of them and used his magic usage as an excuse to sleep during the trip. Naruto cursed as he rolled his sleeve up, the cloth having fallen from his arms moving. After coming into the desert, he had been forced to take off his chainmail and roll his pants and shirt sleeves up as far as they could go in order to stay cool. He noted that Sasuke hadn't fared any better, as his clothes were also rolled to reveal as much skin as possible without taking off his shirt. Naruto thought about taking his shirt off, despite the scolding he would get from Sakura. Although he would be more vulnerable, he would also be much cooler, and at this moment in time it seemed to be a fair trade. Don't even think about it, Naruto, Sakura called as he began to reach for the hem of his shirt. Naruto stomped his foot, whirling around to face her. She walked beside her pony, her black shirt drenched in sweat as well. Why not? Naruto whined, we're going to die of heat before we get there at this rate. I'd rather get some burns than sweat to death. So you'd rather be covered in blisters and be in pain rather than be in the heat, which can be dealt with if you drink water, Sakura questioned, her eyebrow raised. Naruto gulped at the thought of being covered in blisters. It would certainly make the journey less enjoyable than it already was. As he was about to give his answer, a sudden wind blew through the area, blowing sand into his face. He spat onto the ground, some of the sand having gotten into his mouth. "I'd hold onto your horses if I were you," Kakashi called back, his arms wrapped around his horse's neck. The three looked over at him questioningly. "Why would we do that?" Naruto asked, wiping his mouth. Kakashi merely pointed ahead of them, his hat pulled down even more. As they looked over, their eyes widened as they saw a huge wave of sand approaching them quickly. Naruto quickly jumped onto his horse, holding onto the beast for dear life. As soon as he had, the wind buffeted them harshly, sand blowing in every direction. It seemed like it had a mind of its own, determined to knock them into the wind. "What is this?" Naruto shouted, head ducked down to avoid getting sand in his eyes. He couldn't see anyone else, and for a moment he feared that everyone had gotten blown away. "Sandstorm," Kakashi called out. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, and from the feel of it, one controlled by a mage. "Why are they attacking us?" Sakura called out, trying to calm her pony. The most it had ever encountered was a drizzle back home. "Don't they realize we're trying to help them?" "Probably not," Kakashi called back. "Anyone entering the desert may be seen as intruders that need to be eliminated." "Why didn't you tell us this before we entered?" Sasuke shouted, glaring in what he assumed was Kakashi's direction. He thought he saw shoulders move in a shrug, as well as a pointed hat in the midst of the storm. "It didn't occur to me that it would be important," he called out. Sasuke could hear Naruto start to shout profanities at the mage. He was half tempted to as well, except he kept his mind focused on moving forward. Luckily for him, it was almost easy to keep Asuka from panicking, as the horse was normally calm and had seen many storms. However, he could hear Sakura struggling to keep her pony under control, the biting winds and stinging sand causing the horse to be frozen in place. "Varrock," she cried, pulling at the reins and clicking her heels, "we have to move forward." She whinnied reluctantly, slowly starting to move forward. As Sakura began praising the pony, the wind and sand seemed to sweep up from below. Varrock reared on her hind legs, spooked as the sand attacked her underbelly. Sakura shouted, pulling back on the reins as she felt the wind start to lift her from her seat. "Schist," she cursed, jamming her heels into Varrock's sides so as to keep from flying away. The wind seemed to surround her, working to lift her off her saddle and into the skies. Already her bottom was halfway in the air. "Can't you do something, Kakashi?" "I could, but it would tire me out completely," he called. "I'd practically be useless in any future battles today." "If you don't wish for me to take a few feet off your height," Sakura growled, "then I suggest you do something now." Kakashi sighed, muttering about how dwarves were impatient. He raised his staff. The black moon that hung on the edge glowed white before sending out a bright light throughout the area. As the light spread, the wind died down, the sand falling back to the ground. Sakura sighed as she felt her bottom return to her seat. "Why didn't you do that earlier?" Naruto shouted, shaking sand from his hair. Kakashi yawned, slumping forward in his seat. "Thought you guys could handle it," Kakashi said, tipping his hat to keep the sun out of his eyes. Soon light snores could be heard, causing the other three to glare pointedly at him before continuing onwards. Shukaku's tail twitched angrily as he glared at Gaara. Their previous plan had failed on account of the intruder's mage, yet for some reason Gaara seemed completely calm. "Life as we know it is about to end," he growled, approaching the meditating mage. Gaara merely raised a hand, causing him to halt. Gaara stood, dusting off his robes. "How can it end?" Gaara began, "when their real battle has only just begun?" "You know I hate riddles," Shukaku stated, annoyed. Gaara merely smirked, turning around to face the dragon. "If Kankuro is doing his job correctly, then those four will be dead by the end of the day." After having removed as much sand as possible from their bodies, the group continued moving towards their goal. After the sandstorm, they traveled together closely, in case another wind attack came at them and they needed to be anchored again. Kakashi continued to sleep, having been put in the center of the group considering that he was the most vulnerable at the moment. "So, what do you think he'll be like?" Naruto asked, breaking the silence. Sakura and Sasuke looked over at him, eyebrows raised in question. "What who will be like?" Sakura asked. Naruto rolled his eyes, as if the person in question was obvious. Shukaku, he announced, and I guess, by default, the mage protecting him. I for one think they're going to be kind of mean. It doesn't matter what they're like, Sasuke interjected. The only thing that does matter is getting them to fight alongside us. It totally matters what they're like, Naruto protested, because then it'll help us decide what the best course of action to convince them is. Naruto is right, Sakura said. Sasuke glared slightly at her. As for what they're like, I think they're just incredibly protective of each other. I'm sure once we tell them who we are, everything will work out. I guess so, Naruto said while Sasuke merely grunted. Sakura sighed, turning her attention back to the land ahead of them. She squinted, noticing a dust cloud rising in the distance. What's that up ahead? Sakura asked. Naruto looked ahead, squinting to try and make out what it could be. Dunno, Naruto replied. Sure hope it's not another sandstorm or something. Whatever it is, keep your guard up, Sasuke muttered, already reaching for his bow. Naruto and Sakura nodded, reaching for their own weapons. The cloud approached them quickly. When it was 100 feet away, it began to dissipate. They tightened their hold on their weapons, awaiting any attack from the cloud. As the last of it began to disappear though, there was nothing standing where something should be. Naruto blinked, his face the epitome of confused. What the hell? Naruto muttered. Just as he spoke, 3 creatures shot up from beneath the sand around the group. One appeared to be a large salamander, hissing at them. Naruto looked around frantically, trying to locate the other 2. In the air, Sasuke shouted, pointing upwards. Naruto looked up, just in time to see 2 humanoid creatures flying in the sky. Their chests opened, releasing a rain of knives upon them. Naruto quickly raised his shield, taking cover as the knives hit upon the metal. When the barrage ceased, he quickly held his shield up defensively in case the salamander tried to attack. What he saw however was Sakura charging towards it, holding her axe, seemingly unscathed from the knives. Sakura, Naruto called out. Sakura swung at the salamander, her axe aimed at its head. The salamander immediately raised its frill, and as the axe made contact a dull ringing noise could be heard in the area. One of the flying ones, which had red horns and multiple arms, flew down towards her, knives seemingly appearing out of its joints. Sakura jumped out of the way, causing the one in the air to collide with the salamander, arms getting tangled in its body. Naruto, get your ass over here, she called out. Sasuke, any that are flying, shoot them down with your arrows. But Naruto began to protest, earning him a pointed glare from Sakura. He immediately silenced himself, jumping off the horse and charging towards the battle, sword and shield in hand. Sasuke knocked an arrow, taking aim at the one that was still in the air. As it began a descent, Sasuke released his arrow. The arrow soared through the air, reaching its mark in the neck of the creature. Instead of falling dead to the ground however, the creature landed and charged towards him, blades appearing from its wrists. Sasuke cursed, jumping from his horse and sending more arrows towards it. Each hit its mark, but the creature continued coming. Sasuke dodged as it swung at him, dropping his bow and grabbing his sword instead. He deflected each blow, his teeth grit as it continued to attack. These things aren't human, Sasuke shouted as he was pushed backwards by the creature. Naruto was facing off against the horned one, doing as well as Sasuke was in defeating it. Sakura was battling the salamander, whose main weapons were its death and its iron-clad tail. They're made of wood and metal, Sakura shouted, jumping back as the salamander snapped its jaws at her. They seem similar to puppets, so if you hit the joints you should be able to break them. Why not tell us that before I wasted arrows, Sasuke shouted, aiming at one of the joints. His sword made contact, the arm separating from the rest of the body, though the other 3 were also able to make contact. Sasuke could feel the blood begin to seep from wounds, though he could tell they weren't deep. I was a bit distracted in case you didn't notice, Sakura shouted, swinging her axe to hit the side of the frill. It suddenly flew off the main body, lodging itself far away from the battle in the sand. She then lifted her axe high above her head and slammed it between the salamander's eyes. The wood splintered along the head, as well as other parts of the body splintering from the force of the hit as well. She then ran over to where Naruto was. He had already separated at least 2 of the arms, but it seemed that no matter how many segments he cut off, more blades would keep appearing. Sasuke continued blocking and cutting. So far, he had cut off another arm, and only 2 were left. However, as he moved to remove another one, a blade shot out from the torso of the creature, effectively blocking his attack. Eyes widened, he suddenly felt as the 2 arms cut across his body, creating deeper wounds on his torso. He jumped back, cursing as the blood stained his clothes. He glanced over at where Kakashi was. To his surprise and chagrin, the mage was still sleeping, the sounds of battle not having woken him up at all. He turned his attention back at the creature, it having charged at him while he was distracted. He parried its blows before jumping back and putting distance between them. Guess it's time for that, Sasuke thought, watching as it charged towards him again. He coated his hand in his blood, holding it up towards the creature. He focused his energy towards it, imaging it dismantling before him. Taira Harwar, he shouted. The creature stopped in its tracks before exploding into multiple pieces, its hidden blades becoming visible. Its head flew over to where Sakura and Naruto were fighting, prompting Sakura to look over at him in disbelief. "And why didn't you do that earlier?" she shouted, gesturing at the debris. Sasuke panted, grabbing his discarded bow from earlier. "An elf that hasn't been formally trained is a dangerous elf," he replied, nocking an arrow. He aimed towards the head of the creature that Naruto was fighting. He released the arrow, watching it fly and stick in its head. As it turned its attention towards him, Naruto sliced the head off of it, the rest of the body falling to the ground. Sasuke smirked as Naruto cheered his shield high in the air. "We did it, guys," Naruto proclaimed, "and you said that you couldn't do magic." Naruto jested, jabbing Sasuke in the ribs as he approached them. Sasuke winced slightly, frowning as he looked at the creature on the ground. "What I did was basic magic taught to all elves at an early age," he replied. "True magic in my clan is only performed by those that have felt true power." "Ah, a member of the Uchiha clan, eh?" a voice noted. The 3 turned towards the voice, which emanated from the remains of the salamander. The back of it opened up, revealing a young man dressed in a black cloak, the hood covering his hair. He looked up at them, grinning, the purple markings on his face not fading despite the sweat on his face. He stepped out of the creature towards them. They tightened their hold on their weapons, getting into defensive positions. "Who are you?" Sasuke asked, eyes narrowed. The man smiled, pulling out a dagger of his own. "The name is Kankuru," he replied, "and it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance before you die, Uchiha elf." "The only one dying today is you," Naruto shouted, charging towards him. Kankuru smirked, punching him in the stomach. Naruto's eyes widened as he was tossed aside, skidding across the sand before coming to a stop. "Anyone else?" Kankuru asked, cracking his knuckles. Sasuke and Sakura glanced at each other. They figured the only way to defeat him was to use teamwork, otherwise they would end up like Naruto. Just as they were about to charge him, a loud yawn was heard. All attention snapped towards Kakashi as he sat up, rubbing his eye. "Ah, what a nice nap," he commented. He glanced around, noticing the strewn remains of the destroyed creatures. "What happened here while I was out?" "About time you woke up, Kakashi," Sakura shouted, glaring at him. Kankuru blinked, analyzing Kakashi. "Kakashi?" he asked, as in, Kakashi Hitaki, mage of all elements? "And master of only a few," Kakashi added. He stepped off the horse, head tilted to the side. "Who may you be?" Kankuru immediately kneeled to the ground, Sasuke and Sakura taken aback by the sudden change in behavior. "I am sorry, Kakashi," he said, "we did not know it was your group coming to visit." "You know him?" Sasuke asked. Kankuru nodded, standing up. "When Gaara was chosen as Shukaku's mage, he came for the ceremony," Kankuru explained. "It has certainly been many years since the last time we saw him. Gaara was but a child then, so obviously he wouldn't recognize you coming into our lands." "Ah, that was all Gaara's handiwork?" Kakashi asked, surprised. "I assumed Shukaku had gotten testy and decided to take control of him again." Kankuru shook his head, a grin on his face. "No sir, since the last you saw him he has gained mastery over the sands. Paired with either Temari or Shukaku, and he makes a very fearsome opponent." "Well, I'm glad Suna is protected by such a capable man," he replied. "Would you mind leading us there so that we don't see Shukaku himself?" "Absolutely," Kankuru said, turning in the direction of the village. He began walking towards it, with Kakashi following him, From his position on the ground, Naruto groaned in pain, while Sasuke and Sakura merely watched their retreating backs. "What the hell was that?" Sakura exclaimed, gesturing towards the two of them. Sasuke merely shrugged, grabbing the lead to his horse and leading him after them. Sakura sighed, rolling her eyes as she went to help Naruto up. By nightfall, Kankuro had led them to a group of sand dunes clustered together. He reached into the dune. Pulling his arm back, it was revealed that it was a door, with a staircase leading downwards into the ground. "You'll have to leave your horses up here," he replied. He caught their suspicious glances, causing him to throw his hands up defensively. "Don't worry, the guardsmen will take good care of them." "They better," Sakura muttered. Sasuke silently agreed with her. Down they went, the stairwell lit by torches along the walls. After what seemed to be hours, they eventually reached the bottom of the stairwell. A thick wooden door greeted them, its ornaments made of brass. Kankuro pushed the door open, slowly revealing to them a city hidden completely underground. Naruto's eyes widened as he took it all in. The streets were made of cobblestones, full of people bustling about, and in the distance stood a large castle made of stone. Kankuro caught his impressed look, smiling smugly to himself as he began to lead them into the city. "Welcome to Suna, the city hidden under the sand." "Damn it, Sasuke, let me wrap it," Sakura shouted, hands on her hips. She was currently standing in front of the bed where Sasuke lay on. His wounds had been taken care of by the healers of Suna, but they had said to change the wrappings every few hours in order to help keep it clean. However, Sasuke was proving to be difficult, as his arms were crossed over his chest as he glared at her. "I can do it myself," he stated, not letting up. Sakura rolled her eyes, staring at him in disbelief. "As much as you'd like to think you can't effectively wrap it by yourself," Sakura replied. "Therefore, you should let me help you instead of being an aggravating prick." "Who do you think will win?" Kakashi asked, leaning over towards Naruto. Naruto stroked his chin as they watched them glare at each other. If Naruto hadn't known any better, he could have sworn he saw heated sparks flying between them. "I think Sakura will," Naruto finally replied after a moment of thought, "although he's putting up a pretty good fight." "Of course I can wrap it myself," Sasuke shot back. "You don't think I can use magic to control a piece of cloth to wrap itself around my body?" "If by wrap you mean choke yourself, then yes, I think you can use it just fine," Sakura retorted. Sasuke huffed, crossing his arms over his chest. He winced slightly, the movement irritating the wounds. Sakura sighed as she noticed how he winced, still in slight disbelief over how stubborn he was being. "Well, the Uchiha are very prideful," Kakashi replied, "not to mention almost as stubborn as mules." Naruto snorted. "Ha, have you met the Haruno clan? They're basically mules dressed as dwarves." "Look, we're not going to always have healers around us," Sakura stated. "Plus, I've been trained back in the village, so I know what I'm doing. Unless, of course, you want to put your trust into one of those two over there." She gestured towards Naruto and Kakashi. The two of them jumped, quickly making it look as if they hadn't been discussing who would win in a match of wills. Sasuke eyed them with a calculating glance, mentally weighing whether it would be good to trust their hands over hers. Sighing, he turned away from them, catching her eye in a dead stare as he made his choice. "Just be quick about it," he grumbled. Sakura smiled and, ignoring the surprised expressions on Kakashi and Naruto's faces, quickly got to work. She went to her pack, grabbing a fresh roll of bandages and a small container. She approached Sasuke, kneeling before him as she opened up the container. The smell instantly made Sasuke scrunch his nose up in disgust. She began unwrapping the old bandages around his chest, slowly revealing the lithe muscles beneath littered with cuts from Kankuru's creatures. Once the bandages were off, she spread the cream on her fingers. "Now, this may sting a little bit," Sakura said, rubbing it over his wounds. Sasuke hissed and flinched away from her slightly. "That hurt," Sasuke snapped at her, glaring. Sakura merely glared back as she continued to spread it. "I told you it would." "You said a little bit," he hissed, his muscles involuntarily flinching. "This feels like you're setting it on fire." "Well, do you want to die from infection or not?" she shot back. Sasuke remained silent. "That's what I thought." Sasuke huffed at her remark, though he stayed quiet as she continued her work. He noticed how her hands were calloused from working in the forges, yet they were quick and gentle at applying the salve. As she finished, she wiped her hands on a cloth, grabbing the bandages and standing up. She unrolled them, swiftly wrapping them around his chest. He wondered how often she treated wounds, due to the skill and professionalism that she showed while she worked. And, despite hating to admit it, he felt rather at peace with her hands on him. It was only until Naruto spoke up that his thoughts were shattered. "I can't believe you're this good, Sakura," Naruto exclaimed, watching her. Sasuke felt her hand twitch slightly before resuming her previous rhythm. "And why is that?" Sakura asked, pulling out a dagger. She cut the wrappings away from the rest of the roll. "You know I've treated my clan members for injuries since you began your apprenticeship with Iruka." "Well yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "but I always imagined you'd be really rough, considering your demeanor and all." Sasuke felt her tie the knot to the wrappings a little too tightly, but not enough to be uncomfortable. He decided to keep quiet, lest she decide to come after him as well. "Well Naruto, sometimes people with certain demeanors can still do other skills." "Well then why not bring some of the gentleness in your life," Naruto said, grinning, "especially towards me. I mean, sure you're nice, but I'd love if you were gentle like you are now." "Because if she was, you'd be even more of an idiot," Sasuke interjected as Sakura stood. She snorted, covering her mouth to try and hold back a laugh as Naruto glared at him. "No one asked you, ya elf bastard," Naruto shouted, pointing at him. "Besides, I totally have Kakashi on my side." "Right Kakashi?" Naruto asked, looking up at the mage. Kakashi looked back at him, wishing to not have been dragged into this. "I think Sasuke has a point," Kakashi replied. Naruto's eyes practically bugged out of his head as Sasuke smirked, Sakura laughing beside him. "You dirty rotten mage," Naruto grumbled, pouting, "nothing but a messenger of conflict I bet." "Ah Naruto," Sakura said, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, "if I wasn't hard on you, it'd mean I didn't value you as family." Naruto looked up at her, a grin on his face. "You mean it?" Sakura ruffled his hair, earning a shout from him. "Just like the other 10,000 times I've told you, yes I mean it." "Ha, see Sasuke," Naruto said, grinning from ear to ear. "I get to be family, while all you get is friendship. If friendship keeps me alive during this journey, then that's all I need," Sasuke replied, pulling his shirt back on over his head. Naruto pouted, though was distracted as a knock on the door caught his attention. The door opened, revealing Kankuro standing there. He had pulled down his hood, revealing a head full of messy brown hair. "Tamari wanted me to let you know that dinner is ready," Kankuro announced. "It won't be anything fancy, but we hope that you'll enjoy it all the same." "Anything is better than what Sakura cooked for us," Naruto said, earning him a smack from Sakura. "What? Your cooking can kill an orc, I swear. I didn't hear you complaining as you ate it like a wild animal," Sakura said, glaring at him. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, looking down at the ground. "Well, it was either eat quietly, or get beaten up," Naruto replied. "Wasn't exactly too hard of a decision." Kankuro laughed, bringing their attention back to him. "Well, we promise that our food can't be used for poison in a pinch." Naruto grinned. "That's all I need to hear. Let's go eat." The stars shone over the plains as three cloaked figures rode to their destination. A city slowly came into sight, causing them to slow their pace until their horses came to a complete stop atop a hill overlooking the site. Firelight atop a massive wall surrounding the city twinkled in the distance. They could barely make out the guards at the top watching for intruders. "So this is Danzu's city," one of them said, removing their hood. Blue hair held up by a white flower pin was revealed, as well as a striking feminine face with gray eyes. One of her companions nodded, his facial piercings glinting in the moonlight. "He said that his personal assistant would come greet us here," he replied, eyes watching the city. The other companion huffed as he grinned, revealing razor-sharp teeth. "HMPH, it would have been much more fun to kill those guards and work our way in," he said, his grin growing wider at the thought. "After all, we'll need practice for those elves." "I doubt Lord Danzo would appreciate that, Kisame," the other man said. Kisame shrugged. "I tend to not care what anyone appreciates, pain," Kisame replied. "As long as Lady Kagaya is happy, then that is all that matters. And I would assume that killing Lord Danzo would make her upset." A voice called out in the night. The three were instantly on their guard, looking towards where the voice came. A young man with dark hair stepped out of the shadows, a smile plastered on his face. Pain watched him warily, hands tied on the reins to his horse. "Are you Sai, the one we seek?" Pain asked. Sai nodded. "And you three must be Kisame, Pain, and Konan," Sai replied. "Lord Danzo has been awaiting your arrival for many days." "Yes, well, horses can only travel so quickly," Kisame said. Sai nodded, turning towards the city and leading them down the hill. "I've told him that, but he is a rather impatient man. Especially when it involves his desires to protect this city from all dangers." Sai explained. They reached the bottom of the hill. He led them to the gates, identifying himself to the guards. The guards saluted, pulling open the large stone doors. Sai turned and smiled at them, the gates revealing the cobblestone streets of his city. "If you would so kindly follow me, we shall meet with Lord Danzo immediately," he said, turning around and walking into the city. Pain, Konan, and Kisame followed after him quietly. As soon as they had entered, the guards began closing the doors, the sound of the stones slamming together echoing in the peaceful night. "Right this way," Kakuzu said, opening the dining hall's door. Naruto stepped into the room and stared in wonder. The hall was large, with multiple tables scattered everywhere throughout. On the walls hung tapestries depicting Suna's history. Naruto noticed a beige dragon depicted throughout them, creating sandstorms that destroyed his enemies. At the farthest wall, where a large table that had yet to be filled stood, were 5 portraits of what he assumed were the ruling families. His eyes widened as he noticed Kakuzu in one of them, accompanied by a girl with hair the color of sand and a young boy with bright red hair. He whipped his head around, staring accusingly at Kakuzu. "You didn't tell us you were some big shot around here," Naruto shouted, pointing at him. Kakuzu blinked in confusion before finally a grin spread on his face. "Ah, so you noticed," Kakuzu replied. "Well, at the time of our meeting I didn't consider it important to tell you who I was. But, yes, I am part of the current ruling family, although, Tamari is the brains behind the whole operation." "Ya got that right, brother," an older woman called out, causing the group to turn their heads. She approached them, her hair pulled into 4 ponytails, teal eyes shining with mirth. As she walked, her long black dress moved with her, the slits on the sides revealing toned legs, the red sash around her waist cinched to accentuate her curves. Naruto noticed that she wore black fingerless gloves as she whipped out a small fan and quickly unfolded it, fanning herself with it. "Atamari," Kakashi said, walking over to her. She grinned, greeting him with a hug and a clap on the back. Naruto leaned in towards Kakuzu conspiratorially. "Hey, is your sister courting anyone?" Naruto whispered. Kakuzu looked at him, bewildered. "I mean, she's currently courting the captain of the guard, Shikamaru Nara," Kakuzu replied, "though, if you ask her, she as well as he vehemently denies courting the other." Naruto nodded, slightly disappointed in the news. Sakura rolled her eyes, smacking him behind the head. He yelped, holding the area as he glared at her. "What was that for?" he hissed. "For trying to find a maiden in the middle of a life-threatening journey," Sakura replied, frowning at him. "What is wrong with you, Naruto?" "Hey, if I'm going to inherit a throne, I need a queen," Naruto explained innocently, "and I'm sure we'll be seeing many beautiful women, so I need to scope out my options now. Unless of course, you want to be my queen Sakura," he asked, grinning mischievously. Sakura scowled, shoving his face away from hers as she headed towards the table after the others. "I told you when we were 12, and I'll tell you again," she replied, not interested. Naruto grumbled, crossing his arms over his chest as he followed after them, Sasuke following behind him. The table they sat at had multiple plates of food on beautiful china spread across it. Naruto wasn't sure whose stomach growled first, but from the sheepish look on Sakura's face it seemed that she might have been the culprit. As Tamari took her seat at the head and Kakuzu sat on her left, Naruto couldn't help but notice that the seat on her right remained empty. "Hey, where's the other guy?" Naruto asked, motioning towards their family portrait. Tamari followed his gesture, noticing that he was pointing at the red-haired boy. "Ah, you mean Gaara," Tamari said. "He has to calm that big baby Shukaku. Apparently you 4 getting into the village has left him a bit sourer than was anticipated. According to the guards, sandstorms are happening all across the desert." I guess we're sorry," Naruto replied, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. He was surprised when Tamari laughed, her head thrown back. When she was calmed, she leaned forward on the table, grinning conspiratorially. "Ah, it's fine," she said. "Besides, between you and me, that dragon needed to be beaten at his game. Full of nothing but hot air if you ask me, and I'm glad it was you four who deflated him a bit." "Yes, well, you're not the only one who's glad it was us," Kakashi stated. Tamari nodded, fingers laced together under her chin. All traces of the mirth left her features as she watched Kakashi, a serious shadow seeming to fall across her face. "So it's true," she murmured, "the Enchantress Kaguya returns to start a new reign of terror." Kakashi nodded. "I'm afraid so. That's why we have come to Suna, in order to seek the help of Shukaku in the inevitable battle." "Well, I wish you the best of luck with that," Tamari replied, leaning back in her chair. "For as long as he has lived, Shukaku has maintained a very isolationist attitude. Whenever anyone comes into the desert, he summons storms to destroy them. Whatever he doesn't kill, we do." "Sounds like a wonderful personality," Sakura stated sarcastically. Tamari chuckled, a smile gracing her features as she glanced at her. "Yes, well, I'm sure that Gaara will at least try to protect you from his wrath," she explained. "After all, he helps protect the rest of this village from his wrath whenever he deems something has gone amiss." "And why would you assume I do such a thing?" a male voice asked from behind her. Tamari turned, her teal eyes meeting eyes of the same color, only belonging to her brother Gaara. Kakashi frowned as he watched Gaara take his seat, noting the deep bags beneath his eyes. "I would assume you'd do such a thing," Tamari began, "because if you don't, it is almost certain death for us all. I have done what I can to convince Shukaku not to annihilate us all where we sit today," Gaara said, piling food onto his plate. "You may have to give me a month's time to even consider getting him to agree to go into battle." Tamari frowned, noticing his demeanor. "The two of you fought, didn't you?" "We always fight when these matters come to hand," Gaara replied. "This time around we just happened to fight twice in a single day. He almost had me, for a moment, but I was able to keep him at bay." "What do you mean by, had?" Sasuke asked. Gaara looked up at him, finally taking note of their presence. "So you are the four?" he murmured. He shook his head slowly, regaining his concentration. "Anyway, by had, I mean that he almost took control of me." "How can he do that?" Sakura asked, looking over at him. Gaara glanced her way as he began to cut his food, continuing his explanation. "A dragon communicates with humans telepathically. As such, the dragon has direct access to the human's mind, and can wreak havoc if they so wish. The one who is close to the dragon, however, is one who is able to withstand any attacks on the mind from the dragon. Or, it is someone that the dragon prefers, and would never attack. I happen to be the former, since Shukaku tends to disagree with anything that isn't him." "That's interesting and all," Naruto said, "but we need to talk to him immediately." "Not tonight, obviously, but tomorrow would be a good time." Gaara glared at him. Naruto felt as if a cold wind swept through the room. "If you value your life, you will not attempt to communicate with him anytime soon." Naruto gulped, fidgeting slightly in his seat. Well, if you value the lives of the people in this village, you'll let us see him tomorrow." Gaara glared harder at him, his fists clenching slightly. Sand began moving on the floor towards Naruto at rapid speeds. A shout of surprise left his throat as it began climbing up his body. He heard Sakura shout his name as he leapt to her feet, the chair falling to the floor. As the sand began covering his eyes, he saw Tamari leap to her feet. A wind blew through the room, blowing away the sand that had begun covering him. As he slumped forward in his chair, body shaking, he noticed that Tamari suddenly had a large fan in her hands, panting slightly from the adrenaline. He barely registered Sakura kneeling at his side, calling his name to see if he was all right. He merely saw Gaara's eyes on him, the cold teal staring straight into his soul. "If you still wish to see Shukaku, Konkaru will bring you," he stated coolly. He suddenly turned and left the dining hall, his red robe swishing behind him as he walked. Tamari sighed, watching his retreating back. Kakashi looked at her, having watched the whole ordeal calmly. "Shukaku seems rather merciless," Kakashi noted. Tamari looked at him, a weary smile on her face. "You don't know the half of it," Tamari replied. "Sometimes controlling him puts such a mental and physical strain on Gaara that sometimes I wish he would just destroy us. Not to mention that out of the mages chosen, Gaara is the youngest of them," he said, "chosen at birth, trained immediately afterwards, the toll on Gaara has been great." Tamari nods. I know that he took the burden gracefully, but it still hurts to see him suffer, having to bear the weight of this entire village," she said, looking down at the ground. She turned towards Kakashi, her shoulders squared back in determination. "But the time has come for this burden to be shared. If your quest is truly meant to succeed, then that boy will be the one to help carry Gaara's burden. Perhaps," she said, looking thoughtfully over at Naruto, "he may even be able to change his future." Kakashi hummed thoughtfully. We should stick with seeing if he can even survive tomorrow's meeting with Shukaku. We'll talk about more philosophical matters afterwards." "Oi, Naruto," Sakura said, shaking him slightly, "get a hold of yourself." He really tried to kill me," Naruto thought, eyes staring blankly ahead. "If it hadn't been for Temari, I would have been dead now. Is this what the rest of the journey is going to be like?" "Oi, Naruto," Sakura called again. Naruto suddenly snapped out of it, blinking as he looked over at her. She sighed, worry written clearly across her face. "Thank goodness. I've been trying to talk to you for a while now." Naruto grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. No need to worry, Sakura. A little tantrum like that isn't going to scare me off." Sakura smiled, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, as long as you're alright." "Well, I think that's enough excitement for one night," Kakashi proclaimed, clapping his hands together. "Now, why don't we head to bed, unless of course we wish to see what other surprises await us." "I'm certainly ready to sleep," Sakura said, stretching slightly. "Seems like forever since I've last slept in an actual bed." Kakashi smiled, his eye crinkling in amusement. "Well then, let's head out." The four of them headed towards the entrance, Kakashi and Sakura taking the lead. Naruto trailed behind them, Sasuke walking slightly in front of him. Naruto was lost in his thoughts, too concerned with tomorrow's events to notice that Sasuke had spoken to him. A hand waved in front of his face, snapping him out of his thoughts. He looked over at Sasuke, the owner of the hand. "What did you say?" Naruto asked. Sasuke sighed, rolling his eyes as he continued moving forward. "I said, you shouldn't worry about tomorrow," Sasuke replied. "Out of the four of us, you're the one we can't let die." Naruto blinked. "But none of you guys can really die either. I mean, you're all important too." As important as guardians can ever be," Sasuke scoffed. "We are replaceable, and we are meant to protect you first and Kakashi second. So don't worry, because the only ones who may die tomorrow are Sakura and I." Naruto looked over at Sakura. She was talking animatedly with Kakashi, a carefree look on her face. "Does she know that?" "Of course she does," Sasuke replied. "It was a given when she volunteered for this quest. And as you said earlier, she sees you as family, so even if you weren't the heir to the throne of Konoha, she'd willingly throw her life away for you." "You really think that?" Naruto asked, slightly in awe. Sasuke rolled his eyes, looking at him as if he was stupid. "I may not have met many dwarves, but I know that they're fiercely loyal to their clans and their allies," he stated. "Therefore, you've nothing to worry about for tomorrow." Naruto nodded, staring quietly ahead as he thought over everything that Sasuke had said. As they continued to walk down the hallways, Naruto thought of continuing the journey without Sasuke and Sakura. Nights spent around fires where the two weren't bickering or coming to terms with each other. Days traveling where Sakura wasn't scolding him for doing something embarrassing, or getting into arguments with Sasuke over trivial matters. As he thought of those days, he realized that the journey wouldn't be the same without them. That nothing would be the same, even after they had finished the quest. "No," Naruto spoke quietly, catching Sasuke's attention. "You're wrong." How am I wrong?" Sasuke asked, eyebrow quirked. Naruto looked at him, determination set across his face. "Because I do have something to worry about tomorrow," Naruto replied. "I have to worry about losing my friends. I may have a special role in this giant scheme, but you two have special roles in my life. So don't tell me to worry, because just the thought of losing either of you makes me worry." Sasuke blinked, before a smirk graced his features. Then you better be on your toes tomorrow. Shukaku certainly seems to be a rather testy dragon." Naruto grinned. "Nothing a little beat down can't solve." Although it was still early in the morning, the room that Naruto stayed in was bustling with movement. Sakura and Sasuke were gathering their necessary weapons. Naruto, however, sat on the edge of the bed, his sword and shield already strapped to his back. He knew that they would all have his back, however the first meeting with Gaara the night before had unnerved him. As Kankuru knocked on the door though, he squared back his shoulders, catching Sakura's attention. She gave an encouraging smile as he stood, cracking his neck. "Ready to meet Shukaku?" she asked. Naruto gave her a grin, though he could feel the fluttering intensify in his stomach. "Ready as I'll ever be," he said, heading to the door. He opened it, greeting a somber-looking Kankuru. Naruto nodded towards him. Kankuru turned, leading the quartet away from their comforts to where Shukaku lay. As they walked, Naruto looked out over the village that lay beneath the sand, watching as their lives began to unfold before his eyes. Mothers were doing laundry and beginning to cook, while various merchants were already beginning to peddle their wares in the streets. For a moment, Naruto felt a sense of homesickness wash over him, as these early morning activities reminded him of the ones that occurred back home. "I hope they're all right," he thought to himself. Images of Iruka and Jiraiya flashed through his mind, and the thought of them suffering because of him left an imprint on his mind that he couldn't shake. However, as soon as the dark thoughts plagued his mind, Kakashi's hand moved to ruffle his hair, distracting him from his thoughts. He looked up at the mage, blinking in surprise. Kakashi gave a reassuring smile. "They'll be all right," he said. "Jiraiya is incredibly talented in combat, and Iruka can certainly hold his own. Your village will be all right in your absence." Naruto smiled, looking back out at the village. "I know, it's just, well, what if Shukaku gets so mad he goes after them?" he asked, looking back at him. "There are safety measures in place to ensure that he doesn't escape," Kakashi explained. "Besides, if Shukaku were to leave, this village would begin to crumble. Not only that, but he would be a bigger target for Kagaya." "So this whole village is dependent on him?" Naruto asked. Kakashi nodded, looking out at the village. "As you noticed, the village is hidden underground, yet there is airflow from the outside," Kakashi stated. "That is Shukaku's doing. Despite what he may claim, the protection of this village is his primary duty. Without the village, he would be much more vulnerable. So, he protects them from outsiders, and in return the villagers protect and revere him." Naruto nodded in understanding, though he had trouble understanding how an entire village rested on one creature's powers. Kakashi ruffled his hair again as they reached large doors. Kankuru pulled them, revealing a grand staircase leading upwards. "Don't worry, you'll understand it in time," Kakashi said as they began walking up the staircase. Naruto followed after them, thinking over Kakashi's words. He glanced up at the backs of Sasuke and Sakura as they walked, both silent for once during the trip. "Protection is a duty, huh?" Naruto thought to himself as the light from the village grew dimmer as they traveled farther down the passageway. Torches on the walls were their only light through the winding staircase, illuminating carvings on the walls depicting what Naruto assumed were more pictures of Shukaku's powers. After what seemed like hours, they came upon another set of doors. Kankuru pushed them open, allowing light from the room ahead to filter in. The group blocked the light, eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness. As they lowered their hands, they saw Gaara standing at the entrance, arms folded across his chest. He surveyed the group, taking in their weapons. He suddenly turned his back on them, heading down a vast hallway towards a different chamber. "Follow me," Gaara said, robes flowing behind him as he walked. As they exited the passageway to follow him, Naruto looked around the grand hallway that they stood in. Pillars made of stone lined the hallway, holding up a grand ceiling. At the end of the hallway stood a great door, large enough for what he assumed a dragon could be able to walk through. As they walked, their footsteps echoed throughout the hallway, making the space seem even larger than it already was. As they approached the door, Naruto tried to swallow the lump in his throat, wiping his palms on his clothes. "It's now or never," he thought, staring determinedly at the door. Despite there being no visible handle, Gaara placed his hands on the door, closing his eyes. A sudden gust of wind blew from behind them, pushing the doors open. Dust rose from the ground as they creaked open slowly, revealing a spacious chamber before them. Gaara stepped in, the rest of them following cautiously behind him, watching in case they were being led into a trap. As Naruto entered, Kankuru trailing behind him, a sudden gust of wind slammed the doors shut. Naruto turned and watched as Kankuru's wide eyes were the last thing he saw before the door closed. He pulled out his sword, his grip tight as he watched the room with wide eyes. Gaara stood calmly in the middle, arms at his sides as he stared straight ahead. "You brought them here," a voice roared in their minds. Naruto glanced over at Sasuke and Sakura, both looking equally as surprised as he felt. Gaara continued looking forward, his body still relaxed despite the dangers awaiting them. "They are here to help," Gaara replied, "they mean us no harm." A pair of yellow eyes glowed, watching their every movement. "That doesn't mean they won't bring us harm," the voice replied, "you should have never brought them here. They want to protect you from Kaguya," Gaara countered. A sudden gust of wind blew through the room as the large beige dragon pounced, his snout a few inches away from Gaara's face. "I don't need their protection," Shukaku growled, glaring into Gaara's eyes. The dragon's head suddenly lifted away from his face, staring straight into Naruto's eyes. Naruto felt paralyzed as he met the dragon's gaze. Shukaku growled again, stalking away from Gaara towards Naruto. "I especially don't need help," Shukaku began, "from little boys who are playing soldier. If they truly wish to help, they should leave and go face Kaguya alone. Leave us out of the equation, and kill her in her own lands. You know as well as anyone else that she's too powerful for them alone," Gaara replied. "She'd kill them in an instant. All the more reason to not ally ourselves with them," Shukaku shouted, facing him again. He circled Gaara, his wings close to his body as he glared at the mage. "I refuse to become a slave just because they're unable to protect us. And if you value your life, you'll agree with me. Kaguya is stronger than any of us," Gaara retorted. "Whether or not we value our lives won't matter when she comes for us. And you know that she will, no matter who we ally ourselves with. There is safety in numbers, and deciding to help them is the only way that we can survive." "Enough," Shukaku snarled, his eyes zeroing on Naruto again. "I wish to hear the boy's side of the argument." Naruto blinked, realizing that the dragon was addressing him. "Me," he choked out, cursing himself for not sounding more confident. Shukaku snorted, the puff of air almost knocking him off his feet. "Yes, you," Shukaku replied, "convince me. And if you cannot convince me, the consequences will be dire for you." Naruto gulped, feeling all eyes on him as he approached Shukaku. His hand trembled on his sword, mind frantically searching for the right words to speak. He straightened his back, blue eyes staring straight into golden. Naruto began. He faltered for a moment before taking another breath. "We wish for your help in defeating Kaguya." "Why?" Shukaku growled. Naruto was caught off guard, feeling the words he wanted to say slip away from his tongue again. "Well, why you see?" Naruto stammered, "If you don't ally with us, the world will be destroyed. And well, that would be pretty bad for everyone, so you should join us against Kaguya. That way, she can be defeated, and we can make the world a safer place for everyone to live in." Shukaku stared at him. Suddenly, a deep rumbling chuckle could be heard, slowly changing into boisterous laughter. Naruto blinked, confusion covering his features, forgetting his fears for a moment as the dragon laughed. "Foolish child," Shukaku laughed, "just the answer I was expecting from a child such as yourself." "Now just wait a minute," Naruto began, but was suddenly cut off as Shukaku roared. "Enough," he growled, "I've made my choice. Following a pathetic, uncertain little boy like you would mean certain death for everyone, no matter what your lineage may be. Leave my temple, or face my wrath." Naruto watched as Shukaku turned away from him. A feeling of rage swelled up in him, causing him to tighten his hold on his sword. Naruto growled, and with a mighty shout swung his sword, hitting the tip of Shukaku's tail. His eyes widened as Shukaku turned around, glaring at him. Naruto began, trying to find the right words. Shukaku suddenly roared, a gust of air slamming into Naruto so hard that he went flying. He vaguely heard a shout of his name as he flew across the room. Before he could hit the opposite wall though, he was caught by a soft cushion of sand. He cracked open an eye, seeing Gaara's hand outstretched towards him, though his eyes never left Shukaku. "You dare to attack me," Shukaku roared, glaring at Naruto. "I will destroy you and your pathetic comrades. Your bodies will lie in my desert for all eternity." "Good job Naruto," Sakura said sarcastically as Naruto landed on the ground. Naruto brushed himself off, looking over at her. "Hey, it's not my fault I lost my temper," Naruto shouted. "He was laughing at me." "Well now he's doing a lot more than laughing," Sasuke said, drawing his bow and arrow. Sakura drew her axe, ready to assist in the fight. Shukaku roared as he saw the weapons, multiple blasts of air streaming from his mouth. Gaara raised his other hand, gesturing for the sand to form a wall protecting them. The air slammed into the sand, causing a shower of sand to rain down on them. "A little help would be nice, Kakashi," Gaara shouted as he waved his hand. They gathered together and shot towards Shukaku. Kakashi nodded, raising his staff. The moon glowed as electricity gathered around the head. He pointed it towards Shukaku, a lightning bolt shooting towards the dragon. Shukaku roared as a large gust of wind averted the lightning bolt, causing it to slam into a pillar. Shukaku turned his attention away from the pillar, only to be slammed to the ground by Gaara's sand. As he thrashed, it slowly began to cover him, his body blending in with the sand. Kakashi swirled his staff, causing a circle of fire to surround him as Shukaku's body continued to be covered. He slammed his staff down, causing the fire to spread towards Shukaku's body. It slowly encased the sand, causing it to emit a bright light as it glowed. After a while, Kakashi swept his hand in the air, causing the fire to dissipate and leaving an encasement of glass surrounding Shukaku in its place. Naruto watched with wide eyes as Kakashi and Gaara looked at each other, both of them panting after the effort exerted. This is the true power of a mage, Naruto thought. Suddenly, Gaara groaned. He fell to the ground, clutching at his head, eyes shut tightly. Naruto ran towards Gaara. Ignoring the calls of Kakashi to stay back, he knelt beside him, shaking him by the shoulders. "Oi, are you alright?" Naruto shouted, looking at him concerned. Gaara looked up at him, his face scrunched in pain. "Get away," he breathed, staring at the ground. Naruto blinked, confusion flitting over his features. "What are you?" He was suddenly interrupted as Gaara roared. Naruto instantly felt himself being yanked back by his collar as sand suddenly rose up from the ground where he had previously stood. He looked up, noticing that Sasuke had been the one to pull him back. Standing up, he watched as Gaara rose, a glazed look to his eyes. "What's going on?" Naruto asked, looking over at Sasuke. Sasuke knocked an arrow on his bow and let it fly. It was immediately blocked by Gaara's sand, causing him to let out a curse. "He's possessed," Sasuke replied, knocking more arrows. Naruto watched as Kakashi shot a bolt of lightning towards Gaara. Gaara merely waved his hand, redirecting the bolt towards Kakashi. Kakashi suddenly raised a wall of earth from the ground, though he still stumbled back as the lightning bolt hit the earthen wall. A blur of pink and black moved out of the corner of Naruto's eye. Sakura charged towards Gaara, her axe raised as he was distracted. She raised it above her head and swung it towards him. Despite her speed, the axe got caught in sand. She watched with wide eyes as it began to creep up towards the axe. She growled, yanking it free of the sand as arrows came flying towards Gaara. Suddenly a gust of wind blew back the arrows and Sakura as the sand enclosed Gaara in a sphere. Sakura went skidding backwards, stumbling slightly as she reached Sasuke and Naruto. "Is it your goal to get yourself killed first?" Sasuke asked as he watched warily. Sakura grinned, pushing her helmet out of her eyes. "Only if it's your goal to stand back and shoot arrows the whole time," Sakura replied. Sasuke merely smirked at her answer. Kakashi shot another jet of fire towards the sand. It encased it, creating another glass prison for Gaara, similar to the one that currently encased Shukaku. Naruto watched the entire thing with wide eyes as Kakashi leaned heavily on his staff. "That should keep him at bay for a bit," Kakashi panted out, looking over at the other three. "Keep your guard up," he shouted out, catching their attention. They could break out at any moment. "Break out?" Naruto asked, looking at the encasement of the two, but they're totally immobilized. "If you think this can hold me, you've got another thing coming," Shukaku's voice shouted. Naruto whirled to face Shukaku, watching as the glass encasing Gaara was suddenly shattered. Gaara snapped his fingers, the glass encasing Shukaku shattering as well. Shukaku roared, a blast of air catching the falling shards in mid-air and shooting them towards the group. Naruto ducked behind his shield as Sasuke and Sakura dodged, though some of the shards cut their arms. Gaara waved his hand in a circular motion, the glass halting and following his movements. He directed it towards Kakashi, the shards raining down on his unprotected body, cutting every inch they could reach. "Kakashi!" Naruto shouted, eyes wide in shock. He watched as Kakashi leaned heavily on his staff, knees hitting the ground as blood ran down his face. Gaara merely smirked, glancing over at Shukaku. "I leave those three to you," he stated, "whatever power you need, take it." Shukaku's eyes gleamed sinisterly. "As you wish, Gaara," he replied, a claw swiping through the ground. Sand rose from the strike, and with a sudden burst of wind was heading towards them. Sakura grabbed Naruto and pulled him out of the way as Sasuke jumped to a different area. Naruto and Sakura skidded across the ground before finally settling farther away. Shukaku watched the sand, his eyes tracking its movements as it hovered. "Highly defensive," Sakura muttered, standing up. Naruto followed her movements, his shield in one hand and sword in the other. He glanced over at her, watching as her brows were furrowed. She finally turned towards Naruto. "You need to stay back," she said, getting into an offensive position. Naruto blinked, bewildered by her statement. What? Now wait just a second," Naruto began, but a glare from Sakura cut him off as she spoke. "No, now you wait a second," she spat. "It was your rash behavior that got us into this mess, so now we need to get ourselves out of it. The last thing we need is you dying, so instead of focusing on Shukaku, why not just focus on staying alive?" "But I can help," Naruto protested, raising his shield and sword. Sakura sighed, focusing her attention back on the battle. "Just stay out of our way," she replied before charging back into the fray. He watched as she dodged sand coming at her from seemingly every direction. Sasuke was shooting arrows, trying to find weaknesses in Shukaku's armored body. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Sakura approaching him, dodging another sand stream. Her back pressed against his, she glanced over her shoulder at him. "Get through the armor yet?" Sakura asked, swinging her axe to deflect glass that came towards them. Sasuke shook his head, eyes focused on Shukaku. "His scales are too thick to hit the skin beneath with arrows," Sasuke muttered, drawing his own sword, "and he can summon defenses too quickly for anyone to get through." Sakura shoved him out of the way as a gust of wind flew past them. Though he stumbled, he was able to stay on his feet, Sakura still watching his back. "Got any magic words to help us out?" Sasuke smirked. "Only if you're willing to trust me." "Not exactly like we have a lot of options here," Sakura replied, shrugging. Sasuke placed his hand on her arm. He concentrated his energy, working to funnel it into her. Sakura tensed slightly as she felt warmth spread throughout her as he spoke in his native tongue. "Amataelka," Sasuke said, hand falling as he finished speaking. Sakura suddenly felt as if she were lighter. She glanced over at him, eyebrow raised. "What did you do to me?" Sakura asked. Sasuke looked back at her, his face mere inches away from hers. "Gave you speed," he replied. "You go get some hits in, I'll keep him busy." Sakura nodded, raising her axe and charging towards Shukaku. Shukaku roared as he noticed her increased speed, firing more wind and sand in her direction. She dodged them easily though, jumping high into the air and slamming her axe down into his back. Shukaku roared in pain, thrashing as she stood atop him, pulling the bloodied axe out of his skin. Shukaku raised his tail at her, yet as he swiped at her she was already off his back and onto the ground. She ran alongside him, her axe cutting through his limbs, causing him to fall to the ground as blood rushed from the wounds. Gaara looked away, Kakashi lying at his feet, noticing that Shukaku was being injured. His eyes narrowed as he watched Sakura cut at him, pink hair flying with the speed she was moving at. He raised his hand, sand rising with the movement. He gestured his hand in her direction, the sand moving towards her. Sakura went to swipe at his other leg when she was suddenly slammed back into the wall by the sand, the weight of it crushing out all the air in her lungs. Sasuke cursed as he heard Naruto call out her name. He repeated the spell, feeling his own body get lighter. He drew his sword and rushed towards Gaara. Gaara looked over at him, a wall of sand rising just in time to block the sword from stabbing him in the chest. Sasuke grit his teeth, lifting the sword upwards and out of the sand, causing the wall to crumble. Gaara merely smirked, the sand reforming to attack him. Sasuke continually dodged and swung his sword, though Gaara continued to keep his defenses up. Naruto watched, his hand tightening on his sword. I have to do something," Naruto thought, charging out from his hiding spot. Shukaku swung his tail in his direction, knocking Naruto flat on his back. Sasuke turned his head in his direction, giving Gaara enough time to encase him in sand, causing him to fall to the ground. Shukaku stared at Naruto, yellow eyes gleaming with murderous intent. What can you do? Shukaku taunted, all your comrades have fallen. The mage will die of blood loss soon, and your friends will be crushed to death very shortly. As for your life, I will gladly let you watch them die before killing you slowly as well. I don't care what you do to me, just as long as you leave them alone, Naruto shouted. Take it all out on me. I am the reason you're mad after all. Then why send your comrades in to clean up your mess? Shukaku asked, his snout almost touching Naruto's forehead. Why have them suffer when you should be the one in pain? Because they're willing to die for me, Naruto replied, and I was too afraid to tell them to step aside and let me fight. They wanted to protect me, and now it's my turn to protect them. You speak as if there is friendship between you, Shukaku snorted, isn't it only their job to protect you? Should you really care if they die? I don't care whether they see it as their job or not, Naruto shouted, rising to his feet. To me, they're my precious friends, and friends don't let friends suffer alone. So now it's time for Naruto Uzumaki to be your next opponent. Shukaku stared at him. Slowly, a deep chuckle rumbled through his throat. Foolish boy, you'd die before you even lay a scratch on me, Shukaku replied. How do you plan to fight someone far stronger than you without anyone else to save you? I don't need anyone else to save me, Naruto retorted. I may need some help, but I don't want anyone to risk their lives for me. I want to protect those that are precious to me, just like. Naruto trailed off slightly, slowly staring up into his yellow eyes, just like you. He finished softly. Shukaku growled, eyes narrowing as he glared. I have no one precious to me, Shukaku snapped. Naruto shook his head, stepping closer to him. Shukaku. No, you do. You just don't want to admit it, Naruto countered. Why else would you protect this village? It's not because it's a duty or to have shields. It's because you actually like these people. There is only one, and he has been dead for centuries, Shukaku roared. Naruto stood tall as air rushed past him, the wind ruffling his hair and clothes. Shukaku glowered at him as Naruto stayed standing, not at all cowering away from his wrath. Whether or not he's dead, you still protect the memory of him, Naruto replied, and that's what matters most to you. So here is my new proposition to you. Fight alongside us to protect his memory. Together we'll keep him alive by defeating Kagaya. Shukaku watched him warily. The sand encasing Sakura and Sasuke began to dissolve. And if you fail? If we never try, we can never succeed, Naruto retorted. Shukaku snorted, turning his back on Naruto. The doors to the chamber opened as Kankuro, Temari, and various healers surged into the room. Amidst the commotion as Kankuro and Temari talked to Gaara, Naruto could only hear Shukaku's final words. I will hold you to your promise, Naruto Uzumaki. Still can't believe all he needed was a talking to, Sakura muttered, arms crossed over her chest from her position in the bed. She was propped up, bandages covering her torso, the sand having cut into her body as it squeezed the life out of her. Well, at least nobody died today, Kakashi said cheerfully, his body bandaged up as well. Sasuke nodded, having escaped with a few scrapes and bruises, though the wound on his torso had opened up again. Naruto sat on the floor, vaguely listening in on the conversation as he thought back to the conversation he had had with Temari as they walked back to the village. So you connected with him, eh? Temari asked, nudging Naruto in the side. He glanced over at her, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. I guess so, Naruto replied, I dunno how I did it, but I apparently did it. Well, be proud of yourself, Temari stated, only one other person was able to do that, and that was the original mage, Bunpuku. Bunpuku? Naruto asked. Temari looked over at him, remembering that he wasn't familiar with Shukaku's history. Ah yes, Bunpuku, Temari began. He was the first mage that came into control of Shukaku. With their combined power, they were able to create Suna. However, Bunpuku didn't become the mage because he could withstand mental attacks from Shukaku. Rather, he became the mage because Shukaku had a preference to him. So that's who Shukaku was talking about, Naruto said, realization dawning on him. Temari nodded, a small smile on her face. Yes, she replied, and as you can tell, Bunpuku had great power over Shukaku. He was the one who convinced Shukaku to create the village, and we believe it's his memory that truly keeps Shukaku from doing anything harmful to us. While it's really just legend now, it's believed that the two had a friendship, with both of them willing to die for the other. Once Bunpuku died, it was said that that was when Shukaku became the dragon that he is today, isolating us from the rest of the world. But since you connected with him, well, perhaps there is still hope for the dragon yet, Tamari said, laughing slightly as she walked beside him. Naruto looked out the window, watching as the village bustled about below them. He could hear Kakashi mutter something, causing Sakura to screech her annoyance at him, while Sasuke muttered under his breath about annoying dwarves. A gentle breeze blew into the room, ruffling Naruto's hair. A small smile came across his lips as he closed his eyes. Perhaps there is hope for us all, Naruto thought to himself. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.